The Korean Mafia boss never loved his black wife, but when she packed her bags, he realized too late. Min Jae Park signed his divorce papers at 3 a.m. with the arrogance of a man who'd never lost anything that mattered, because in his world, nothing ever had. His wife walked out with a single suitcase containing 3 years of invisible devotion, and he laughed. 1 week later, when his empire started crumbling and his enemies moved in for the kill, he finally understood the difference between owning someone and needing them. By then, she was gone. His business was bleeding, and the only woman who could save him was the same one he'd spent 3 years destroying. Welcome to the Story Corner. If you're ready for chaos, romance, and suspense, you're in the right place. Hit follow and comment where you're watching from. The photographers would later call it the wedding of the decade. Vogue Korea would feature it in their spring issue with the headline, "When East Meets West, a Modern Dynasty Unites." The guests, drug lords in Armani, politicians with blood on their Rolexes, and socialites who smiled with veneered teeth while counting bodies in their heads, would post carefully curated photos on Instagram with captions about love conquering all. What a spectacular pile of horseshit. Min Jae Park stood at the altar of the Shilla Hotel's grand ballroom, surrounded by $10 million worth of white roses that his wedding planner had assured him symbolized purity and new beginnings, which was hilarious considering he'd ordered 3 executions that morning before his first fitting. His custom Tom Ford tuxedo felt like a straitjacket. His jaw ached from clenching it. And when the doors opened to reveal his bride, he didn't smile. Why would he? Smiling was for people who gave a damn. Aaliyah Washington walked down that aisle like she was heading toward salvation instead of a life sentence. Her Vera Wang gown probably cost more than most people's houses. His money, he noted with bitter satisfaction, and she wore it like she belonged in it. Maybe she did. The Washington family had money, power, and a body count that would make most serial killers weep with envy. But they didn't have what Min Jae had: soul. The ports. The pipeline from Busan to Los Angeles that moved everything from prescription pills to military-grade weapons with the efficiency of Amazon Prime. His father had arranged this matrimonial hostage situation from his literal deathbed, tubes coming out of him like he was some kind of medical octopus, voice raspy with morphine and lung cancer. Marry the Washington girl, the old man had wheezed. Secure the West Coast. Don't fuck it up like everything else you touch. Thanks, Dad. Nothing says paternal love like arranging your son's marriage between doses of fentanyl with all the warmth of a business memo. The old bastard had died 3 days later, and Min Jae had cried exactly 0 tears because the Park family didn't do emotions. They did power, and power didn't weep. So here he was, watching his arranged bride glide toward him with a smile that probably took hours to perfect, her father, the notorious Raymond Washington, walking beside her with the expression of a man who'd just closed the deal of his life. Which, technically, he had. The Washington Syndicate controlled the West Coast ports. The Park family controlled the East Asian pipeline. Together, they could move product from Seoul to San Francisco faster than most people could order takeout. All it cost was Min Jae's freedom and this woman's future. Fair trade, obviously. Aaliyah reached the altar, and up close, Min Jae could see she was objectively beautiful, the kind of beautiful that made his men forget how to form complete sentences when she'd visited last month for the getting-to-know-you dinner that had been about as romantic as a tax audit. She had dark skin that seemed to glow under the ballroom lights, braids that fell past her shoulders with some kind of beads woven through them, and eyes that looked at him with something dangerous. Hope. God, she actually had hope in her eyes. Like this was a real wedding. Like he was going to be a real husband. Like any of this was anything other than a very expensive business transaction where she happened to be the commodity. Cute, naive, pathetic, dearly beloved, the officiant began. Some Minister Raymond had insisted on, probably because he actually believed in God or redemption or whatever fairy tales help crime lords sleep at night. Min Jae tuned him out. He was already mentally going through his afternoon schedule. Meeting with the Choi family about territory disputes, a call with his Busan operation about a shipment delay, drinks with his current mistress who understood that their arrangement was purely physical and would never, ever involve feelings or wedding rings. Do you, Min Jae Park, take Aaliyah Washington to be your lawfully wedded wife? The room went quiet. Every gangster, politician, and socialite waited. Min-jae looked at Aaliyah, really looked at her for maybe the first time since she'd walked down that aisle. She was watching him with those hopeful eyes, her hands trembling slightly around her bouquet. Orchids, he noted, because apparently someone had told her those were his favorite, which they weren't. He didn't have favorites. Favorites were for people with feelings. I do, he said flatly, with all the enthusiasm of a man agreeing to a root canal without anesthesia. Her face fell for just a fraction of a second. So quick most people probably missed it. But Min-jae saw it, registered it, and felt absolutely nothing. Do you, Aaliyah Washington, take Min-jae Park to be your lawfully wedded husband? I do. Her voice was soft but steady, and that hope was still there, clinging to life like a terminally ill patient who hadn't accepted reality yet. The kiss was mechanical, contractual. Her lips were warm. He registered that the way one might note the temperature of bathwater clinically without investment, and then it was over. The crowd erupted in applause that sounded like thunder, or maybe gunfire, or maybe just the sound of two lives being chained together against their will. Ladies and gentlemen, the officiant announced with a kind of enthusiasm usually reserved for lottery winners, I present to you Mr. and Mrs. Park. Mrs. Park. The title hung in the air like smoke after an execution. The reception was somehow worse than the ceremony, which Min-jae hadn't thought possible. The ballroom had been transformed into what his wedding planner called an ethereal garden paradise, which translated to more flowers, more fairy lights, more money wasted on aesthetics that would be forgotten by morning. Aaliyah tried. God, she tried so hard it was almost embarrassing to watch. She smiled at his associates, men who'd killed people for looking at them wrong, and they smiled back like she was their favorite niece instead of a strategic acquisition. She laughed at their terrible jokes, the kind of jokes that usually ended with someone bleeding out in an alley. She attempted conversations in textbook Korean that made his second-in-command, Jin Sung, look at her with something dangerously close to admiration. Min-jae watched from across the room, drinking whiskey like it was his job, which in a way it was. Someone had to maintain appropriate emotional distance in this farce. Your wife is lovely, Hyung, Jin Sung said carefully, sidling up beside him with that diplomatic tone he used when he thought Min-jae was about to do something spectacularly stupid. She's a contract clause with a pulse. Min-jae corrected, not bothering to lower his voice. Don't forget that. Jin Sung's expression did something complicated. She seems kind. Kind doesn't run empires. Kind gets you killed. Min-jae drained his glass, gestured for another. She's here because her father needed my pipeline and I needed his ports. That's the beginning, middle, and end of this story. Maybe you could what? Pretend this is real? Fall in love like we're in some kind of K-drama? Min-jae laughed, sharp and bitter. Love is for people who haven't learned better. I learned better when I was 12 and watched my father shoot my uncle in the head for skimming profits. Love makes you weak. Weakness gets you dead. Jin Sung said nothing, which was wise, and Min-jae went back to drinking and radiating disapproval like a nuclear reactor radiated heat. Across the room, Aaliyah was talking to ancient Mr. Choi, head of the Choi family and a man who'd ordered more executions than Min-jae had eaten hot meals. She touched his arm gently, said something that made the old bastard actually laugh. Laugh, and Min-jae felt something hot and uncomfortable crawl up his spine. Not jealousy. Definitely not jealousy. Probably just indigestion from the overpriced catering. The car ride to the penthouse. Is penthouse. He'd make damn sure she understood that. Was silent except for the sound of soul traffic and Aaliyah's quiet breathing. She kept her hands folded in her lap, still wearing that dress that cost more than most people's cars. And Min-jae kept his eyes on his phone, scrolling through messages from his mistress that were decidedly not appropriate for a man on his wedding night. He didn't care. That was the point. They pulled up to the building, a sleek high-rise in Gangnam that screamed drug money in the most elegant way possible, and Min-jae was out of the car before the driver could even open his door. Aaliyah followed more slowly, like she was walking toward her execution instead of her new home. Smart girl. This was an execution, just a slower one. The elevator ride to the penthouse was 47 seconds of excruciating silence. Aaliyah stared at her reflection in the mirrored walls, and Min-jae stared at his phone, and neither of them acknowledged that they were married now, bound together by legal documents and criminal enterprise. The penthouse doors opened to reveal what Architectural Digest had called a masterpiece of modern minimalism. All clean lines, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Seoul's glittering skyline, furniture that cost more than most people earned in a year. It was beautiful, cold, and utterly empty of anything resembling warmth. Perfect. Aaliyah stepped inside slowly, taking it all in with those wide eyes, and for a moment she looked young, vulnerable, maybe even scared. Min Jae felt nothing. Nothing at all. "Which room is ours?" she asked quietly, and that hope was back, clinging to life like a drowning person clutching driftwood. He turned to face her, made sure his expression was as cold as his voice. "Yours is the east wing. Mine is the west wing. There are approximately 2,000 square feet between us. I suggest you get comfortable in your space." The hope flickered, died. He watched it happen with the clinical detachment of a scientist observing an experiment. "Oh," she whispered. I see. Do you?" He stepped closer, close enough to smell her perfume. Something floral and expensive that someone had probably told her he'd like, which he didn't because he didn't like anything. "This isn't a fairy tale, Aaliyah. You're not Cinderella, and I'm sure as hell not Prince Charming. You're here because your father needed my connections, and I needed his ports. That's it. That's the full story. So don't go catching feelings or expecting me to play house with you." He paused, decided to twist the knife a little deeper because why not? "I have mistresses for that." Her face went blank. Carefully, painfully blank, like she was physically holding back whatever she was feeling, and Min Jae told himself the tightness in his chest was just indigestion from too much whiskey. "Understood," she said, voice barely above a whisper. She turned toward the east wing, that expensive dress trailing behind her like a burial shroud, and Min Jae went to his own wing, poured another drink, and told himself he'd just established appropriate boundaries. Definitely not cruelty, just clarity through the walls, because even 2,000 square feet couldn't completely soundproof heartbreak. He thought he heard crying. He turned up his music and poured another drink. If you're enjoying this so far, let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. The first month of marriage, Aaliyah tried to kill him with kindness. Min Jae woke up every morning to the smell of breakfast he never asked for, American-style pancakes at first, then kimchi jjigae when she figured out he preferred Korean food, then eventually nothing because he kept leaving for work without eating any of it. She'd be in the kitchen, hair wrapped in a silk scarf, wearing pajamas that probably cost a fortune, standing over the stove like she was auditioning for some domestic goddess role he'd never casting her for. "Good morning," she'd say, bright and hopeful as a goddamn sunrise. "I made your favorite. I eat at the office," he'd reply without looking at her, straightening his tie in the hallway mirror. Every single day. By week 2, she'd stopped making elaborate breakfasts. By week 3, she'd stopped saying good morning. By week 4, she'd learned to make herself invisible, which was exactly what Min Jae wanted. Except it wasn't. He'd come home late. He always came home late, because why would he rush back to a house that felt like a mausoleum with better furniture, and find evidence of her existence scattered throughout the penthouse like breadcrumbs? A book left open on the couch, its pages filled with Korean language notes in her careful handwriting. Dishes in the sink from a dinner she'd eaten alone. The faint scent of her perfume lingering in the hallway between their separate wings like a ghost haunting a house it couldn't leave. She was there, but she wasn't. Present but invisible, existing in a negative space of his life like a shadow he'd created and now couldn't escape. Jin Sung noticed because Jin Sung noticed everything, which was why he was still alive in a business where noticing the wrong thing got you killed. "Your wife seems lonely, Hyung." He ventured one afternoon in Min Jae's office, his tone carefully neutral, like he was commenting on the weather and not potential emotional negligence. "She has 2,000 square feet of penthouse to keep her company," Min Jae replied, not looking up from the shipping manifest that needed his signature. "If she's lonely, she can get a cat. Maybe you could what? Take her on dates? Buy her flowers? Pretend this is something it's not." Min Jae finally looked up, his expression cold enough to cause frostbite. "She's an adult. She knew what this was when she signed up for it. If she's unhappy, that's not my problem to solve." Jin Sung's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. Smart man. What Min Jae didn't know because he was too busy not caring, was that Aaliyah had stopped trying to be his wife somewhere around week 5 and had started trying to be useful instead. She'd begun appearing at his business meetings like a ghost materializing out of thin air. The first time it happened, Min Jae had been mid-negotiation with the Tanaka family over territory disputes in Busan when the conference room door opened, and Aaliyah walked in wearing a black pantsuit that made her look like she belonged in a boardroom instead of a kitchen. "What are you doing here?" he'd asked, not bothering to hide his irritation. "Sitting," she'd replied simply, taking a seat in the corner like she'd been invited. Unless it's not allowed? His men had looked to him for guidance. He'd shrugged. Let her sit. She'll get bored and leave. She never left. Instead, she sat there meeting after meeting, silent as a statue, absorbing information like a sponge absorbing blood. She learned the business, the shipments, the routes, the bribes, the bodies buried in metaphorical and literal ground. She learned which politicians could be bought with money and which needed to be threatened with exposure. She learned that the Yakuza alliance was failing because of a translation error in the contract that no one had caught because none of Min Jae's men spoke fluent Japanese. She fixed it in flawless Japanese that she'd apparently learned in secret, probably during those long, lonely nights in her wing of the penthouse, while Min Jae was out with his mistress. "Your wife saved the Tanaka deal," Jin Sung reported one evening, his voice carefully neutral, but his eyes saying, "I told you so," without actually saying it. Min Jae responded, scrolling through his phone where his mistress was sending him increasingly explicit photos that he was increasingly less interested in looking at. She also identified the mole in our shipping operation. Good for her. Min Jae Hyung. Jin Sung hesitated, which was never a good sign because Jin Sung never hesitated. Perhaps you should acknowledge, should what? Thank her for doing basic observation. Give her a participation trophy. Min Jae's voice could have frozen hell. She's bored and looking for attention. That's all this is. Women always need attention. But even as he said it, something uncomfortable twisted in his gut. Because Aaliyah wasn't asking for attention. She wasn't asking for anything. She'd stopped trying to get his approval somewhere around the time he'd forgotten her birthday. Not that he'd ever known when it was, and had started simply existing in the spaces he left empty. She was becoming indispensable to his organization while remaining completely invisible to him. And Min Jae, in his arrogance, thought that was exactly how it should be. He had no idea he was watching a queen build her own empire while he played checkers with pawns. He had no idea that invisible women see everything. And he definitely had no idea that 3 years later, when she finally packed her bags and walked out, she'd take his entire kingdom with her. But that revelation was still years away. For now, Min Jae went home to his empty wing, poured his expensive whiskey, and congratulated himself on maintaining appropriate emotional boundaries. The ghost in his house watched him through the walls and planned her revolution in silence. 6 months into their marriage, Aaliyah Washington became fluent in 3 languages: Korean, Japanese, and the universal dialect of men who thought women were decoration. That last one was the most useful. She learned it sitting in the corner of Min Jae's conference rooms, watching powerful men dismiss her presence the way they dismiss a houseplant. Aware she was there, vaguely appreciative of the aesthetic, but never expecting her to grow thorns and draw blood. Big mistake. The Choi family is asking for a 15% increase in protection rates. Min Jae's accountant, a nervous man named Sung Min, announced during a Tuesday morning meeting. They claim operational costs have increased. Tell them to fuck off, Min Jae replied, not looking up from his phone where he was texting someone, probably his mistress. Aaliyah noted with the detachment of a scientist observing mold. "We had a deal. They honor it or we find someone who will." With respect, Hyung, Jin Sung interjected carefully, the Choi family controls 3 of our major distribution routes. Losing them would cost us more than 15%. Then we don't lose them. We remind them why they need us more than we need them. From her corner, Aaliyah cleared her throat. Every head in the room turned toward her like she'd suddenly started speaking in tongues. "If I may," she said quietly, in perfect Korean that made Sung Min's eyebrows climb toward his hairline. "Mr. Choi's grandson just got accepted to Harvard. His granddaughter is getting married in 3 months. He's not actually asking for more money. He's asking for face. Give him a gift." A generous wedding present for the granddaughter. A Harvard donation in the grandson's name. Frame it as the Park family celebrating his family's success. He'll withdraw his request within a week. The room went silent. Min-jae finally looked up from his phone, his expression unreadable. And you know this how? His tone was sharp enough to draw blood. Because I had tea with Mrs. Choi last week. She invited me. I went. Aaliyah kept her voice steady, professional. She mentioned both events. I mentioned how generous my husband is. She mentioned how Mr. Choi worries about maintaining dignity while managing costs. I'm simply connecting dots. More silence. Then Jin Sung smiled. Actually smiled, like he'd just witnessed a magic trick. That's brilliant, he said. That's manipulation, Min-jae corrected coldly. But effective manipulation. Fine, make it happen. He went back to his phone. Dismissed her contribution like she'd suggested ordering different coffee for the break room instead of solving $1 million problem. Aaliyah said nothing. Just made a mental note in the journal she kept hidden in her room. Asterisk month 6, day 17. Save the Choi deal. Min-jae's response, indifference. Expected. Asterisk. After the meeting, Jin Sung caught her in the hallway. That was impressive, said Jangnam. He used the term for a boss's wife with genuine respect that felt foreign after months of her husband's contempt. It was obvious, Aaliyah replied, straightening her blazer. Mrs. Choi wasn't subtle. Still, most people wouldn't have caught it, or cared enough to use it. Jin Sung hesitated, then added quietly, he doesn't deserve you. Aaliyah smiled sadly. Probably not, but I didn't marry him for what I deserved. I married him for what my father needed. We all make sacrifices for family, don't we? Jin Sung looked like he wanted to say more, but footsteps echoed down the hallway. Min-jae, probably leaving for lunch with whatever woman was currently warming his bed, and the moment passed. That night, Aaliyah came home to an empty penthouse. Again, she'd stopped expecting anything different. The space between their wings had become an ocean she couldn't cross, and honestly, she was tired of swimming. She made herself dinner, japchae, because she'd finally perfected the recipe after watching 17 YouTube videos and bribing Jin Sung's mother for the family secret, and ate it alone at the massive dining table that could seat 12 but only ever sat one. Her phone buzzed. A message from her father. How's married life, princess? She stared at it for a long moment, then typed, everything you promised it would be. Translation. A beautiful prison with an indifferent warden. She didn't send it. Instead, she wrote, asterisk good. The alliance is strong, asterisk. Because that's what mattered, right? The alliance. The business. The empire built on bodies and blood money and marriages that were really just mergers with witnesses. Later, lying in her too big bed in her too empty wing, Aaliyah opened her journal and wrote, asterisk, I'm becoming someone I don't recognize. Someone harder. Someone who can sit in rooms full of killers and suggest manipulation strategies without flinching. Someone who married a man who can't even look at her without contempt and stays anyway. My mother would be ashamed. Or maybe she'd understand. She married for duty too. Maybe that's the Washington family curse. We're too good at surviving and too bad at living. Asterisk. She closed the journal, turned off the light, and stared at the ceiling where moonlight painted shadows that looked like prison bars. Across the penthouse, in his wing, Min-jae came home at 2 a.m. smelling like someone else's perfume and felt absolutely nothing about the fact that his wife was home alone. Again, he poured himself a drink and toasted his reflection to appropriate boundaries. The ghost in the East Wing heard the toast through the walls and added another entry to her revolution plans. Invisible women see everything, and they never forget. The universe had a sixth sense of humor, Aaliyah decided, when she walked into her favorite coffee shop on a rainy Thursday afternoon and found her husband's mistress sitting at her usual table. She recognized her immediately. Hard not to. The woman looked like she'd stepped out of a Korean drama, all doe eyes and perfect skin, wearing a designer dress that probably cost more than most people's rent. Min-jae had decent taste in affairs, at least. Aaliyah would give him that much. The mistress, Hannah, Aaliyah had learned from overheard conversations she pretended not to understand, was scrolling through her phone, smiling at something that was probably a text from Min-jae Probably something inappropriate. Probably sent while Aaliyah had been sitting across from him at breakfast, trying to make conversation with a man who treated her like furniture. The smart thing would be to leave. Order coffee somewhere else. Pretend she hadn't seen anything. Aaliyah had stopped doing smart things around month 3 of her marriage. Smart things hadn't gotten her anywhere except lonely. "Excuse me," she said in perfect Korean, walking up to the table with her coffee in hand. "Is this seat taken?" Hannah looked up, startled, and Aaliyah watched recognition flicker across her face. The other woman knew who she was. Of course she did. Probably saw photos on Min Jae's phone before he deleted them. Probably heard him complain about his arrangement while they were tangled in hotel sheets. No, it's not," Hannah stammered, suddenly looking very young and very guilty. "Perfect." Aaliyah sat down, crossed her legs, took a deliberate sip of her latte. "I'm Aaliyah. You're Hannah. We both know why this is awkward. So let's just skip the pretense, shall we?" Hannah's eyes went wide as dinner plates. We're not. Please. I'm not here to make a scene. I'm honestly just tired of pretending I don't know." Aaliyah set down her cup, studied the woman who was sleeping with her husband with the clinical detachment she'd learned from sitting in rooms full of criminals. "You're beautiful. Clearly more his type than I am. No judgment there. Mrs. Park, Aaliyah. God, please just call me Aaliyah. Mrs. Park makes me feel like I'm his mother, and we have enough dysfunction without adding Freudian complications." She laughed, sharp and bitter. "How long? I don't think for months. 5? Started before the wedding or after?" Aaliyah kept her tone conversational, like they were discussing the weather instead of infidelity. "I'm genuinely curious. Was I already failing as a wife before I'd even started? Or did he at least give me a grace period?" Hannah looked like she wanted to crawl under the table and disappear into the floor. 2 months after. So I got a probationary period. How generous." Aaliyah took another sip of coffee. "Does he talk about me?" "Mrs. Park." "Aaliyah, I really don't think. He doesn't, does he?" Aaliyah smiled, and it hurt her face. "I'm the ghost in his house. The contract he signed and forgot about. You're probably the only person who makes him feel anything remotely human." Hannah's expression shifted from guilty to something else. Pity, maybe, which was somehow worse. "He's not. He doesn't deserve you," Hannah said quietly. "Everyone keeps saying that. Jin Sung said it last week. You're saying it now. Even I'm starting to believe it." Aaliyah leaned back in her chair. "But here's the thing about deserving. It's irrelevant. I didn't marry him because he deserved me. I married him because my father needed an alliance and Min Jae needed ports, and I was the transaction that made both things happen. That's horrible. That's business." Aaliyah stood up, gathering her coffee and her dignity. "Look, I'm not going to tell you to stop seeing him. Honestly, you're doing me a favor. Keeps him occupied so he doesn't feel obligated to pretend we have a real marriage. Just do me one kindness." Hannah looked up, confused and wary. "When you're with him, when he's actually human enough to laugh or smile or feel something real, remember that he has a wife at home who would have loved to see that side of him, who tried for months to reach it, who gave up because trying to love someone who looks through you like your glass is exhausting." Aaliyah's voice cracked just slightly. "Remember that somewhere, in a penthouse in Gangnam, there's a woman eating dinner alone who used to believe in fairy tales." She walked out before Hannah could respond, before the tears she'd been holding back could fall, before she could completely humiliate herself in front of her husband's mistress in a coffee shop in Seoul. The rain had picked up. Aaliyah stood under the awning, watching water pour from the sky like the universe was crying for her since she refused to cry for herself. Her phone buzzed. A text from Min Jae. * business dinner tonight. Don't wait up. *. She typed back. I never do. Deleted it. Typed. Understood. Sent it. Across town, in that same coffee shop, Hannah stared at her phone where Min Jae had just texted asking if she was free tonight. She looked at the empty chair where his wife had just sat, dignified and devastated in equal measure. For the first time since their affair started, Hannah felt dirty. She texted back, * I'm busy. Don't contact me again, *. Then she blocked his number and ordered another coffee and wondered how a man could be so blind to the treasure he was destroying at home. Min Jae, reading the rejection text, shrugged and called another woman from his contacts. Some men never learn until it's too late. This was one of those men. 1 year into their marriage, Aaliyah stopped sleeping. Not dramatically. She wasn't wandering the penthouse like some tragic heroine from a gothic novel. She simply lay in her California king bed, staring at the ceiling, calculating how many days she'd been married to a man who'd never once asked how she was doing. 365 days. Not one genuine conversation. She'd become a ghost who paid bills and attended meetings and fixed problems that weren't technically hers to fix. She'd saved Minjae's business approximately 17 times by her count. The Choi negotiation, the Tanaka translation error, the mole in shipping, the Yakuza property scheme she'd uncovered before it bankrupted them, and 13 other crises she'd quietly resolved while he was busy not noticing she existed. Her journal was full of these victories. Small revolutions written in careful handwriting that no one would ever read. Asterisk year 1, day 365, anniversary. He forgot. Obviously. I made reservations at that restaurant he likes anyway. Cancel them when he texted he was working late. Working late is code for not coming home. I know this now. I've learned his language, the language of absence. Asterisk. She closed the journal, looked at the clock. 3 a.m. He'd be home soon, or he wouldn't. It didn't matter anymore. Except it did. That was the problem. The penthouse door opened at 3:47 a.m. She heard his footsteps, unsteady, drunk probably, and the sound of keys hitting the marble counter with a clatter that echoed through 2,000 square feet of carefully maintained distance. Aaliyah stayed in bed, stayed in her wing, stayed in her place. That's what ghosts did, after all. Morning came with Soul's perpetual haze and Minjae's perpetual indifference. Aaliyah found him in the kitchen, looking rough, expensive suit rumpled, time missing, smelling like a distillery in someone else's perfume. Again, coffee, she offered, because habits were hard to break even when they were pointless. I'll get at the office. He didn't look at her. Hadn't looked at her in so long, she'd forgotten what color his eyes were when they actually focused on something. Brown, probably. Or black. Did it matter? Minjae. Her voice came out steadier than she felt. Can we talk? Busy. He was on his phone already, scrolling through messages that were definitely more important than his wife's voice. It's our anniversary. That made him pause. For exactly 2 seconds. Then, is it? Great. Happy anniversary. I'll have Jin Sung send flowers to your wing. I don't want flowers from Jin Sung. Then what do you want? He finally looked at her, and his expression was so devoid of interest that Aaliyah actually laughed. Couldn't help it. The absurdity of standing in a multi-million-dollar kitchen, wearing a silk robe that cost more than most people's monthly salary, asking her own husband to care about her existence. It was comedy gold. Tragic comedy, but still. What's funny? Minjae's tone sharpened. He hated not being in on jokes, hated feeling like he was missing something. Nothing. Everything. The fact that I'm standing here asking my husband if we can have a conversation, and he's treating it like I asked him to donate a kidney. She poured herself coffee, black, no sugar, the way she'd learned to take it because sweetness felt inappropriate in this house. Forget it. Go to work. I'll be here, being invisible, solving your problems while you pretend I don't exist. Dramatic much? Desperate much? She fired back, and something flickered across his face. Surprise. Maybe. She never talked back, never pushed, never demanded. You know what? You're right. This is pointless. Go. Leave. Do whatever it is you do that's so much more important than acknowledging your wife. Minjae's jaw tightened. I don't have time for this emotional manipulation. Emotional manipulation? I haven't manipulated anything. I've been invisible for a year while you... She stopped. Swallowed. Forced control back into her voice because breaking down would give him another reason to dismiss her. Never mind. You're right. This is silly. Happy anniversary to us. She walked toward her wing, coffee in hand, dignity barely intact. Aaliyah. She stopped. Turned. Hope, that stupid, resilient, suicidal hope, flickered to life in her chest. What? Minjae looked at her, really looked at her for the first time in months. And for a second, Aaliyah thought maybe, just maybe, he'd finally see her. Finally acknowledge that she was drowning in this marriage, and he was the anchor pulling her under. The Choi meeting is at 3. Don't be late. The hope died. Again, Aaliyah was getting good at killing it. Wouldn't dream of it, she said flatly. He left. She stood in her kitchen, his kitchen, Really, everything here was his, and wondered how many more times she could resurrect hope before it stayed dead. Her phone buzzed. A text from her father. "How's my favorite daughter?" "I'm your only daughter," she typed back. Asterisk still my favorite. "Everything good?" Asterisk. Aaliyah looked around the empty penthouse. The pristine counters. The untouched breakfast. The space where a husband should be and wasn't. "Everything's perfect," she lied. Because that's what ghosts did. They lied to the living about how much being dead actually hurt. She finished her coffee, got dressed for the Choi meeting, and prepared to save Min Jae's business for the 18th time. Invisible women were excellent at being invaluable. It was the cruelest irony of her life. The Choi meeting was where everything changed, though Min Jae wouldn't realize it until much later when the damage was already done and Aaliyah was already gone. She arrived at the office building in Gangnam wearing a black Chanel suit that made her look like she owned the building instead of just being married to the man who controlled it. Her braids were pulled back in an elegant bun. Her makeup was flawless, and she looked every inch the power player she'd been quietly becoming while Min Jae was busy not noticing. Jin Sung met her in the lobby, his expression carefully controlled, but his eyes betraying something like concern. "Sajangnam," he greeted her formally. The Choi family arrived early. They seemed agitated. "About?" Aaliyah stepped into the elevator, pressed the button for the 15th floor. "The shipping routes through Busan. They're claiming we've been undercutting their distribution fees. They want renegotiation or they walk." "They won't walk." Aaliyah checked her reflection in the elevator's mirrored walls, adjusted an earring. "Mr. Choi's grandson starts at Harvard in 2 months. His granddaughter's wedding is in 3 weeks. He needs liquid capital, not principal. This is posturing." Jin Sung stared at her like she'd just performed a magic trick. "How do you?" "Because I pay attention. Someone in this organization should." The elevator doors opened. "Where's Min Jae?" "Running late. He said to start without him." Of course he did. Their anniversary, a critical business meeting, and he couldn't be bothered to show up on time. Aaliyah felt something inside her chest crack. Not break, not yet, but definitely fracture. Like ice developing spider web patterns before it shatters completely. "Fine, let's go." The conference room was tense. Mr. Choi sat at the head of the table, flanked by his 2 sons and 3 of his most dangerous enforcers. They looked up when Aaliyah entered, and she watched the calculation happen in real time. Woman, young, black, probably decorative, definitely not important. They were about to learn a very expensive lesson about assumptions. "Gentlemen," Aaliyah said in flawless Korean, taking a seat at the opposite end of the table like she owned the room. "I understand there are concerns about the Busan distribution arrangement." "With respect," Mr. Choi said, his tone making it clear he had none. "We requested a meeting with Mr. Park, not his wife." The pause before wife said everything. Decorator. Trophy. Irrelevant. Aaliyah smiled. It was not a warm smile. "Mr. Park is delayed. I'm authorized to negotiate on his behalf. Unless you prefer to reschedule for next month. I understand you have significant expenses coming up. Harvard isn't cheap, and weddings in Seoul society can cost a fortune. But if you'd rather wait." Mr. Choi's expression shifted. The sons exchanged glances. She just revealed she knew their financial pressure points, and they hadn't even started negotiations yet. "You're well informed," Mr. Choi said carefully. "I'm thorough. It's a useful trait in business." Aaliyah leaned forward, hands folded on the table. "Here's what I propose. We maintain current distribution fees, but increase your route control from 3 territories to 5. The expanded coverage will generate approximately 30% more revenue within 6 months. More than enough to cover your immediate needs and long-term growth." "And what does the Park family gain from this generosity?" The eldest son, Minho, asked suspiciously. "Loyalty, stability, proof that we value our partnerships beyond simple transactions." Aaliyah pulled out a folder. She'd prepared this last week, anticipating this exact conversation because she'd learned to read the business like Min Jae read weapons manifests. "Additionally, the Park family would like to present a wedding gift for your granddaughter and contribute to a scholarship fund in your grandson's name at Harvard. Call it an investment in future relationships." The room went silent. Mr. Choi studied her with eyes that had seen 50 years of gang warfare and probably twice as many betrayals. "You shame your husband," he said finally. Aaliyah's spine stiffened. Here it comes, the dismissal, the disrespect, with your competence, Mr. Choi continued, and his smile was genuine. He should be here learning from you, not the other way around. We accept your proposal, Mrs. Park, and we remember that you showed us more respect in 10 minutes than your husband has shown in 3 years. They shook hands. The deal was done. Aaliyah had just secured millions in continued revenue and turned a potential enemy into an ally. And she'd done it all while her husband was probably stuck in traffic or deliberately running late because he couldn't be bothered to show up for their anniversary or his own business. She left the conference room feeling powerful and empty in equal measure. The victory tasted like ashes. Jin Sung caught up with her in the hallway. That was extraordinary. That was necessary. Aaliyah pressed the elevator button, watched the numbers descend. When Min Jae arrives, tell him the meeting went well. Tell him I handled it. Tell him. She stopped, laughed bitterly. Actually, don't tell him anything. He won't care anyway. Said Jangnam, do you know what today is, Jin Sung? He hesitated. Your anniversary. Right. 1 year of being married to a man who treats me like I'm wallpaper with a pulse. 1 year of saving his business while he saves his energy for women who aren't me. 1 year of being invisible. She stepped into the elevator, turned to face him. I'm tired of being invisible. The doors closed on Jin Sung's concerned expression, and Aaliyah rode down 15 floors feeling something shift inside her. She'd spent a year trying to earn Min Jae's respect, his attention, his basic human acknowledgement. She was done trying. From now on, she'd build her own empire in the spaces he left empty. And when she finally left, because she would leave, she could feel it now like a storm building on the horizon. He'd realized too late that she hadn't been the trophy wife collecting dust. She'd been the foundation holding up his entire world. Which country are you watching from? Min Jae arrived at the office at 4:17 p.m., which meant he'd missed the Choi meeting by an hour and 17 minutes. Not that he was counting. Not that it mattered. Jin Sung would have handled it or postponed it or done whatever competent second-in-commands did when their bosses were stuck in traffic that was definitely traffic and not a deliberate avoidance of anything anniversary-related. How'd it go? He asked Jin Sung, loosening his tie as he walked into his office. Jin Sung looked up from his laptop with an expression Min Jae couldn't quite read. Your wife closed the deal. My what? Min Jae stopped mid-step. Aaliyah was here? You told her not to be late. She wasn't. Jin Sung's tone was carefully neutral, but his eyes said you're an idiot in every language simultaneously. She negotiated expanded territory for the Choi family, maintained our fee structure, and turned a hostile situation into a partnership. Mr. Choi called her more competent than most men he's worked with in 50 years. Min Jae felt something uncomfortable twist in his gut. Pride? Irritation? Indigestion from the lunch he'd skipped? She had no authority to negotiate anything. She had the authority you gave her when you told her not to be late and then didn't show up. Jin Sung closed his laptop with more force than necessary. With respect, Hyung, your wife just saved us approximately $15 million in potential losses. Maybe a thank you would be appropriate. Don't tell me how to handle my marriage. Someone should, because you're doing a terrible job of it yourself. The words hung in the air like gunshots. Jin Sung had never spoken to him like that. They'd known each other since high school, had built this empire together, had buried bodies together, both literally and figuratively. And now Jin Sung was looking at him like he was a stranger. A disappointing one. Careful, Min Jae said quietly, dangerously. Or what? You'll fire me? Kill me? Add me to the list of people who've tried to tell you the truth and paid for it. Jin Sung stood up, and for the first time in their friendship, Min Jae saw genuine anger in his eyes. Your wife is brilliant. She's loyal. She's been holding your organization together while you've been too busy with your mistresses to notice. And you treat her like she's nothing, like she's invisible. It's shameful. Get out. Gladly. Jin Sung grabbed his jacket. But when she leaves, and she will leave, Hyung, I can see in her eyes, don't come crying to me about how you didn't see it coming. Everyone sees it coming except you. The door slammed. Min Jae stood in his office, surrounded by the trappings of power, the mahogany desk, the leather chairs, the view of Seoul that reminded him daily that he owned this city, and felt something uncomfortably close to shame. He pushed it down. poured a drink instead. Shame was for people who cared, and he didn't care. Except, he found himself pulling up the security footage from the conference room. Watch Aaliyah walk in wearing that black suit that made her look like she could buy and sell everyone in the room. Watch her negotiate with the confidence of someone who'd been doing this her whole life instead of just 1 year. Watched Mr. Choi, a man who'd literally killed people for showing him disrespect, smile at her with genuine admiration. She was magnificent. The realization hit him like a punch to the chest, and Min Jae paused the footage on her face. Why had she become this? This competent, dangerous, invaluable thing? She'd walked into his life a year ago looking soft and hopeful, and he'd spent 12 months systematically destroying that hope until she'd rebuilt herself into something harder. Something he created through neglect and cruelty. Something that might not need him anymore. His phone buzzed. A text from a woman whose name he couldn't remember. Tonight? He stared at it. Stared at Aaliyah's frozen face on the security footage. Made a decision that would surprise everyone, including himself. Asterisk can't. Have plans? Asterisk. He left the office at 6 p.m., early for him, practically unheard of, and stopped at the florist on the way home. Bought white orchids because Jin Sung had once mentioned they were Aaliyah's favorite, though Min Jae had no memory of learning this himself. The penthouse was dark when he arrived, except for a light in the east wing. Her wing. The place he never went because he'd drawn an invisible line on their wedding night and had been too proud to cross it. Tonight, he crossed it. Aaliyah's door was half open. She sat at her desk, writing in that journal she always carried, still wearing the black suit from a meeting. She looked tired, beautiful, alone. Aaliyah. She looked up, startled, and for a second he saw fear in her eyes, like she'd been caught doing something wrong. Like his presence in her space was a threat instead of. What? An olive branch? An apology? Min Jae. She closed the journal quickly. Is something wrong? No. He held out the orchids awkwardly, feeling like a teenager on a first date instead of a grown man approaching his own wife. Happy anniversary. I heard the meeting went well. Jin Sung said you were exceptional. She stared at the flowers like they might be poisonous. You bought me flowers. Is that okay? She took them carefully, like they might disappear if she gripped too tight. It's unexpected. Thank you. Silence stretched between them, uncomfortable and loaded with a year's worth of unsaid things. I should have been there today, Min Jae said finally, the words tasting foreign in his mouth. At the meeting. I'm sorry. Aaliyah's eyes widened. You're apologizing. Don't make it weird. You've never apologized to me. Not once in 12 months. She set the flowers down, and her expression was unreadable. Why now? Because Jin Sung called me shameful. Because I watched you on security footage and realized you become someone I don't recognize. Because I'm starting to think I've made a terrible mistake. Because I should have, he said instead. She studied him for a long moment, and Min Jae felt exposed under that gaze, seen in a way he hadn't been seen in years. Thank you for the flowers, she said quietly. And the apology. Both are noted, not accepted, noted, like she was filing them away as evidence instead of olive branches. Right. Well, good night then. Good night, Min Jae. He left her wing, went to his own, and poured a drink with shaking hands. For the first time in their marriage, he'd tried, really tried, and somehow it felt like too little, too late. The ghost in the East Wing put the orchids in water and wrote in her journal, Asterisk year 1. Day 365, he brought flowers. Apologized. I don't believe him. But part of me, the stupid part that still hopes, wants to asterisk. Both of them went to bed that night feeling like they'd missed something important. Neither of them knew this would be the closest they'd ever come to saving their marriage. The window was closing, and Min Jae was still standing outside, wondering why it was getting so cold. For 3 weeks after the anniversary flowers, Min Jae tried. It was the most pathetic attempt at being a decent husband that Seoul had ever witnessed, but it was an attempt nonetheless. He came home before midnight twice. He ate one breakfast that Aaliyah made, French toast, which she'd learned was his mother's recipe before realizing his mother had never made French toast in her life, and he'd just said it to end the conversation. He even asked her about her day once, though he'd checked his phone 14 times during her answer. Baby steps, Jin Sung called it. Death throes, Aaliyah wrote in her journal. He's trying. Jin Sung said one afternoon when he caught Aaliyah in the office kitchen, making tea while waiting for Min Jae to finish a call that was running 40 minutes over schedule. He's performing, Aaliyah corrected, measuring honey into her cup with scientific precision. There's a difference between trying and going through motions because your second in command shamed you into basic human decency. Jin Sung had the grace to look embarrassed. You heard about that. These walls are thin and you both yell when you're angry. Also, Min Jae's assistant told me. She felt I should know someone was defending me. Aaliyah took a sip of tea. I appreciate what you did. Truly. But you can't fix a marriage by convincing one person to pretend they care. Either he sees me or he doesn't. Right now, he's just looking in my direction occasionally and calling it progress. Maybe that's a start. Maybe it's too late. The words hung between them like a confession, and Jin Sung's expression shifted from hopeful to concerned in the span of a heartbeat. Sajangnam, are you thinking about leaving? Aaliyah didn't answer immediately. She watched her tea swirl in the cup, dark and bitter like everything else in her life lately. I'm thinking about surviving. That's all I've been doing for 14 months. Surviving a marriage to a man who treats me like I'm a business expense he regrets making. He doesn't, he does. You know he does. Everyone knows. She set down the cup. The only person who doesn't seem to know is Min Jae himself. And honestly, I'm exhausted from waiting for the revelation that might never come. Before Jin Sung could respond, Min Jae appeared in the doorway, phone in hand, looking like he'd just closed a deal or started a war. With him, it was often hard to tell the difference. Aaliyah, good, you're here. He barely glanced at her. The Tanaka family wants to renegotiate the shipping terms. I need you to look at the contract, find the weak points, draft a counterproposal by tomorrow. Not could you help me? Not would you mind? Just expectations delivered like orders. Of course, Aaliyah said, her voice professionally blank. I'll have it on your desk by morning. Great. He was already walking away, back to his office, back to his important world where she existed only as a useful tool. Jin Sung looked at her apologetically. He's under a lot of pressure with the Tanaka, don't. Aaliyah held up a hand. Don't make excuses for him. You're better than that. And frankly, so am I. She left the kitchen, went to her temporary desk in the corner of the conference room, because of course she didn't have an actual office despite doing the work of 3 senior advisors, and pulled up the Tanaka contract. 6 hours later, she drafted a counter-proposal that would save the park organization approximately $8 million and strengthen their position in the Japanese market. She'd found 7 loopholes the original lawyers had missed and created 3 new negotiation strategies that even the Tanaka family's legendary advisors wouldn't see coming. She emailed it to Min Jae at 11 p.m. with the subject line, Tanaka counter-proposal. No greeting, no signature, just the work. Because that's all she was to him anyway. Work that happened to sleep in his house and wear his ring. His response came at 11:47 p.m. Good. Knew you'd handle it. 4 words. Not, thank you, or this is brilliant, or I don't deserve you. Just acknowledgement of output, like she was a particularly efficient printer. Aaliyah stared at the email for a long time. Then she opened her journal and wrote, * month 14, day 23. He says he's trying. But trying looks like giving me more work and slightly less contempt. This isn't progress. This is him realizing I'm useful and wanted to keep his useful thing functioning. I'm not a thing. I used to be a woman with dreams. Now I'm just tired. *. Question. How long do you stay invisible before you disappear completely? She closed the journal, turned off her light, and lay in bed staring at the ceiling where shadows looked like prison bars. Same as every night. Across the penthouse, Min Jae read through her proposal and felt something uncomfortably close to awe. She was brilliant, absolutely brilliant. When had that happened? When had his decorative wife become the most valuable asset in his organization? He should tell her, should walk over to her wing right now and say, this is extraordinary. You're extraordinary. I've been blind. Instead, he forwarded the proposal to his lawyers with instructions to implement immediately, poured himself a drink, and told himself he'd thank her tomorrow. Tomorrow became next week. Next week became never. The flowers on Aaliyah's nightstand, Those anniversary orchids he'd brought in a moment of uncharacteristic clarity were starting to wilt. She watered them anyway, kept them alive through sheer force of will, the way she kept everything in her life alive despite the rot underneath. But flowers can only survive neglect for so long before they give up. People, too. And Aaliyah Washington was starting to realize that she'd been wilting for 14 months in a vase that was never meant to hold her. The question wasn't if she'd leave anymore. The question was when. And what would be left of Min Jae's empire when she did? For 3 weeks after the anniversary flowers, Min Jae tried. It was the most pathetic attempt at being a decent husband that Seoul had ever witnessed, but it was an attempt nonetheless. He came home before midnight twice. He ate one breakfast that Aaliyah made, French toast, which she'd learned was his mother's recipe before realizing his mother had never made French toast in her life, and he'd just said it to end the conversation. He even asked her about her day once, though he'd checked his phone 14 times during her answer. Baby steps, Jin Sung called it. Death throes, Aaliyah wrote in her journal. He's trying, Jin Sung said one afternoon when he caught Aaliyah in the office kitchen, making tea while waiting for Min Jae to finish a call that was running 40 minutes over schedule. He's performing, Aaliyah corrected, measuring honey into her cup with scientific precision. There's a difference between trying and going through motions because your second in command shamed you into basic human decency. Jin Sung had the grace to look embarrassed. You heard about that. These walls are thin and you both yell when you're angry. Also, Min Jae's assistant told me. She felt I should know someone was defending me. Aaliyah took a sip of tea. I appreciate what you did. Truly. But you can't fix a marriage by convincing one person to pretend they care. Either he sees me or he doesn't. Right now, he's just looking in my direction occasionally and calling it progress. Maybe that's a start. Maybe it's too late. The words hung between them like a confession, and Jin Sung's expression shifted from hopeful to concerned in the span of a heartbeat. Sejangnam, are you thinking about leaving? Aaliyah didn't answer immediately. She watched her tea swirl in the cup, dark and bitter like everything else in her life lately. I'm thinking about surviving. That's all I've been doing for 14 months. Surviving a marriage to a man who treats me like I'm a business expense he regrets making. He doesn't, he does. You know he does. Everyone knows. She set down the cup. The only person who doesn't seem to know is Min Jae himself. And honestly, I'm exhausted from waiting for the revelation that might never come. Before Jin Sung could respond, Min Jae appeared in the doorway, phone in hand, looking like he'd just closed a deal or started a war. With him, it was often hard to tell the difference. Aaliyah, good, you're here. He barely glanced at her. The Tanaka family wants to renegotiate the shipping terms. I need you to look at the contract, find the weak points, draft a counterproposal by tomorrow. Not could you help me? Not would you mind? Just expectations delivered like orders. Of course, Aaliyah said, her voice professionally blank. I'll have it on your desk by morning. Great. He was already walking away, back to his office, back to his important world where she existed only as a useful tool. Jin Sung looked at her apologetically. He's under a lot of pressure with the Tanaka, don't. Aaliyah held up a hand. Don't make excuses for him. You're better than that. And frankly, so am I. She left the kitchen, went to her temporary desk in the corner of the conference room, because of course she didn't have an actual office despite doing the work of 3 senior advisors, and pulled up the Tanaka contract. 6 hours later, she drafted a counter-proposal that would save the park organization approximately $8 million and strengthen their position in the Japanese market. She'd found 7 loopholes the original lawyers had missed and created 3 new negotiation strategies that even the Tanaka family's legendary advisors wouldn't see coming. She emailed it to Min Jae at 11 p.m. with the subject line, Tanaka counterproposal. No greeting, no signature, just the work. Because that's all she was to him anyway. Work that happened to sleep in his house and wear his ring. His response came at 11:47 p.m. Good. Knew you'd handle it. 4 words. Not, thank you, or this is brilliant, or I don't deserve you. Just acknowledgement of output, like she was a particularly efficient printer. Aaliyah stared at the email for a long time. Then she opened her journal and wrote, * month 14, day 23. He says he's trying. But trying looks like giving me more work and slightly less contempt. This isn't progress. This is him realizing I'm useful and wanted to keep his useful thing functioning. I'm not a thing. I used to be a woman with dreams. Now I'm just tired. Asterisk. Question. How long do you stay invisible before you disappear completely? She closed the journal, turned off her light, and lay in bed staring at the ceiling where shadows looked like prison bars. Same as every night. Across the penthouse, Minjae read through her proposal and felt something uncomfortably close to awe. She was brilliant, absolutely brilliant. When had that happened? When had his decorative wife become the most valuable asset in his organization? He should tell her. Should walk over to her wing right now and say, "This is extraordinary. You're extraordinary. I've been blind." Instead, he forwarded the proposal to his lawyers with instructions to implement immediately, poured himself a drink, and told himself he'd thank her tomorrow. Tomorrow became next week. Next week became never. The flowers on Aaliyah's nightstand, those anniversary orchids he'd brought in a moment of uncharacteristic clarity, were starting to wilt. She watered them anyway, kept them alive through sheer force of will, the way she kept everything in her life alive despite the rot underneath. But flowers can only survive neglect for so long before they give up. People too. And Aaliyah Washington was starting to realize that she'd been wilting for 14 months in a vase that was never meant to hold her. The question wasn't if she'd leave anymore. The question was when. And what would be left of Minjae's empire when she did? Year 2 of their marriage began with a party Minjae didn't want to attend and Aaliyah didn't want to survive. The annual Park Family Gala was a tradition older than Minjae's criminal empire. A spectacle where Seoul's most dangerous people wore their most expensive masks and pretended they were civilized. Politicians rubbed elbows with drug lords. Celebrities posed for photos with money launderers. Everyone smiled and lied and calculated who they'd need to kill before next year's event. Wear the red dress, Minjae said 3 hours before the gala, standing in Aaliyah's doorway like he'd been invited into her space instead of invading it. My mother's associates will be there. First impressions matter. We've been married 14 months. I think I'm past first impressions. Then make better second ones. He was already leaving, already dismissing her, already treating this conversation like a task completed on his daily checklist. Be ready by 7. Don't embarrass me. The door closed. Aaliyah stared at it for a full minute, feeling something dark and dangerous coil in her chest. Not anger. She'd burned through anger months ago. This was colder, sharper. This was the feeling of a woman who'd finally had enough, but hadn't quite figured out what to do with that revelation yet. She wore the red dress. It was a Valentino that hugged every curve she'd maintained despite the stress-induced weight loss, with a neckline that was just scandalous enough to make conservative Annies clutch their pearls. Her braids were styled in an elaborate updo that had taken 2 hours and looked effortless. Her makeup was flawless. She looked like a queen. She felt like a prisoner wearing expensive chains. Minjae barely glanced at her when she emerged from her wing. Ready, not, "You look beautiful," or "That dress is perfect," or any of the things a husband might say to his wife before a major social event. Just, "Ready, as I'll ever be," Aaliyah replied, grabbing her clutch, the expensive one that matched the expensive dress for the expensive party, celebrating an expensive empire built on blood and broken promises. The gala was held at the Park family estate in Gangnam, a sprawling compound that looked like it had been designed by someone who'd watched too many Mafia movies and had unlimited funds to make them reality. Crystal chandeliers that probably cost more than most cars. Marble floors so polished you could perform surgery on them. Wait staff who moved like ghosts and probably knew where at least a dozen bodies were buried. Aaliyah walked in on Minjae's arm, and every eye in the room turned toward them. The power couple. The alliance that had reshaped Seoul's criminal landscape. The beautiful lie wrapped in designer clothes and fake smiles. Minjae. His mother materialized from the crowd like a well-dressed hurricane. Mrs. Park was 73 years old, for feet 11 inches of pure terror, and had allegedly ordered more executions than her late husband and son combined. She looked at Aaliyah the way someone might look at a stain on expensive upholstery, aware of its existence, annoyed by its presence, calculating removal costs. "Mother," Min-jae greeted her with a kiss on both cheeks. You remember Aaliyah, the American. Mrs. Park's English was perfect. Her tone was ice. You put on weight. Min-jae's late father always said American women don't know how to maintain themselves properly. Aaliyah felt Min-jae tense beside her. Whether from embarrassment or anger, she couldn't tell and didn't care. She smiled her pageant smile, the one she perfected during her Harvard days when old white professors had said similarly racist things with the same fake politeness. How observant, Aaliyah replied sweetly in flawless Korean. And you've maintained yourself beautifully, Mrs. Park. The rumors about the facelift hardly show at all. The crowd around them went silent. Someone gasped. Jin Sung, standing near the bar, looked like he was trying not to laugh and failing spectacularly. Mrs. Park's eyes narrowed to slits. Excuse me. You're excused. Aaliyah's smile never wavered. If you'll excuse me as well, I see Mr. Choi and his family. I promised his granddaughter I'd discuss her wedding plans. Congratulations again on that Harvard donation we made in your grandson's name, Mr. Choi. She walked away, leaving Min-jae standing next to his mother like a man who'd just watched a bomb explode in slow motion. Your wife, Mrs. Park hissed, is disrespectful. Your wife, Mr. Choi said, approaching with his family and looking delighted, is magnificent. Min-jae said, you should bring her to our weekly dinners. She has more spine than half your organization. Min-jae watched Aaliyah across the room, surrounded by the Choi family, laughing at something the granddaughter said, looking more comfortable with his business associates than she'd ever looked with him. When had that happened? When had she become this confident, dangerous, invaluable thing that everyone loved except him? You're losing her, Jin Sung said quietly, appearing at his elbow like a conscience he didn't want. I never had her. Exactly. Jin Sung sipped his drink. And now everyone else does. Look around, Hyung. Half this room respects her more than they respect you. The other half wants to recruit her. And you're standing here like you don't even see what's happening. Min-jae looked, really looked. Aaliyah was holding court like a queen with her subjects. The Tanaka family was laughing at something she'd said. The Choi family treated her like beloved family. Even the politicians, corrupt bastards who usually barely acknowledged women, were listening to her like she was speaking prophecy instead of party conversation. She'd built an empire in the margins of his neglect, and he'd never even noticed until it was too late. If you believe a woman like that deserves better than scraps of attention from a man too proud to admit he was wrong, hit subscribe, someone nearby muttered. One of the younger gang members, scrolling through his phone, probably posting about the drama on some private chat. Only toxic narcissists who destroy good women won't subscribe. Min-jae's jaw clenched. He wasn't toxic. He was practical. There was a difference. Wasn't there? Across the room, Aaliyah caught his eye. For a moment, just a moment, he saw something in her expression. Not love, that had died months ago. Not even hope. Just exhaustion. The bone-deep weariness of a woman who'd run a marathon with a smile on her face while her husband stood at the starting line wondering why she looked so tired. She looked away first. And Min-jae felt something he'd never felt before in his entire carefully controlled life. Panic. Min-jae found Aaliyah on the estate's terrace at midnight, after the party had devolved into the usual chaos of drunk gangsters and sloppy alliances. She stood alone, holding a champagne flute she hadn't touched, staring at Seoul's skyline like it held answers she couldn't find anywhere else. You were incredible tonight, he said, and the words felt foreign in his mouth. Compliments weren't his language. Cruelty was easier. Indifference was safer. Aaliyah didn't turn around. Was I? I hadn't noticed you noticing. My mother. Your mother is a racist old woman who thinks I'm not good enough for her son. Which is hilarious, considering her son has made it abundantly clear I'm not good enough for anything except solving problems he's too lazy to solve himself. She finally turned, and her eyes were cold. Colder than he'd ever seen them. Did you come out here to defend her? Because I'm really not in the mood for that conversation. I came to apologize. For what specifically? There's quite a list to choose from. She counted on her fingers, her voice dripping sarcasm. Ignoring me for 14 months? Treating me like furniture? Flaunting your mistresses? Missing our anniversary? Or is this about tonight, when you stood there and let your mother insult me without saying a single word in my defense? Min Jae felt something uncomfortable crawl up his spine. Shame, maybe he'd forgotten what shame felt like. All of it. I'm apologizing for all of it. Why now? Aaliyah set down her champagne with careful precision. Why tonight? After 14 months of not caring. Let me guess. Someone important told you I'm valuable. Jin Sung, probably. Or maybe you overheard the Choi family singing my praises. Or perhaps you finally watched those security recordings and realized I've been running your organization while you've been busy pretending I don't exist. She was right. About all of it. The realization hit him like a punch to the chest. I've been blind, cruel, deliberately oblivious. Aaliyah laughed, sharp and bitter. Pick your adjective, Min Jae. They all fit. You've been treating me like I'm a ghost in your house for over a year, and now you want to apologize because other people told you I'm worth something? That's not an apology. That's you realizing you're losing a valuable asset and trying to secure your investment. That's not. I don't see you as an asset. Then what do you see me as? Because it's certainly not a wife. Wives get conversations and consideration and basic human respect. I get assignments and dismissals and the privilege of sleeping in your house while you sleep in everyone else's beds. The words hung between them like accusations, like truth, like every wound he'd inflicted over 14 months finally bleeding out at once. I know I've been. Min Jae struggled for words. He was fluent in 7 languages, but apparently illiterate in apologies. I haven't been fair to you. Fair. Aaliyah's voice rose. Fair would have been telling me on our wedding day that you'd never love me, so I could manage my expectations. Fair would have been basic kindness. What you've been is cruel, Min Jae. Systematically, deliberately cruel. And the worst part? I don't even think you did it on purpose. You just didn't care enough to be anything else. I'm trying to care now. 14 months too late. She wrapped her arms around herself like she was cold, even though Seoul's summer night was humid and warm. Do you know what it's like to love someone who looks through you like your glass? Who takes everything you offer and gives nothing back? Who makes you feel like you're screaming underwater and no one can hear you? Aaliyah, I've saved your business 17 times by my count. 17 crises that would have cost you millions or gotten you killed. And you've said thank you exactly 0 times. I've learned Korean, Japanese, and Mandarin to help your negotiations. I've attended every meeting, solved every problem, played perfect wife at every social function. And you know what I got in return? Silence. Contempt. The joy of watching you leave for other women's beds while I ate dinner alone in a house that's never felt like home. Min Jae felt something crack inside his chest. I didn't realize that's the problem. You didn't realize because you never looked. I've been invisible for so long I forgot what it felt like to be seen. Tears gathered in her eyes, but she blinked them back with the fierce control she developed over months of private crying. And now you see me because other people pointed me out. That's not love, Min Jae. That's not even respect. That's just you finally paying attention to your own house before it burns down. Tell me how to fix this. His voice cracked. When had that happened? When had he started caring? Please, tell me what you need. Aaliyah looked at him for a long moment, and her expression was devastatingly sad. I needed you to care 14 months ago. I needed you to see me on our wedding day, or our anniversary, or any of the 1,000 moments in between when I was right there, trying so hard to be enough. But you didn't. And now, she shook her head. Now I'm too tired to need anything from you except space. Space. To figure out who I am without you. Because I don't recognize myself anymore. I came to Seoul as Aaliyah Washington, Harvard graduate, my father's daughter, a woman with dreams and dignity. And you've spent 14 months turning me into a ghost who solves your problems and cries in the shower where you can't hear. Min Jae reached for her hand. She stepped back. Don't. Please don't touch me like you care now when you couldn't be bothered for over a year. I do care. You care that I'm useful. That's not the same thing. Aaliyah picked up her clutch, headed for the terrace door. I'm going home, to the East Wing, to my space in your house, where I'll continue being invisible until I figure out how to be anything else. Aaliyah, wait. But she was gone, disappeared into the party like smoke dissipating into air. Min Jae stood alone on the terrace, surrounded by the Seoul skyline and the wreckage of a marriage he destroyed through systematic neglect. Jin Sung found him there an hour later, still staring at nothing. You had a conversation, Jin Sung observed. I had a reckoning, Min Jae corrected. She's leaving. I can feel it. Then give her a reason to stay. I don't think I have one anymore. And for the first time since his father's death, Min Jae Park felt something uncomfortably close to despair. Min Jae woke up at noon on Monday with a hangover that felt like divine punishment and a vague memory of signing something at 3 a.m. The penthouse was silent. Too silent. The kind of silence that felt wrong, like the absence of a heartbeat. Aaliyah, his voice echoed through empty halls. Nothing. He stumbled out of bed, still wearing last night's clothes. Tom Ford's shirt wrinkled beyond salvation, reeking of whiskey and perfume that definitely wasn't his wife's. The night came back in fragments, closing a $30 million deal, celebrating with his latest mistress, coming home drunk and triumphant and stupid, and Aaliyah waiting in the living room, still dressed, still awake. Oh God, the papers. Min Jae ran to the living room like a man escaping a burning building. The divorce documents were gone from the coffee table. In their place, Aaliyah's wedding ring, catching morning light like an accusation. His phone had 17 missed calls from Jin Sung. He called back with shaking hands. Tell me she's still here, Min Jae said before Jin Sung could speak. Tell me I didn't. You signed them, Hyung, at 3 a.m. Drunk, laughing. Jin Sung's voice was flat, professional, the tone he used when delivering news about bodies that needed disposing. She left at 6 a.m. 3 of our top captains went with her. The room tilted. Min Jae sat down hard on the couch where his wife had asked for a divorce and he'd mocked her. Which captains? Kim Dae-young, Park Seo-yoon, and Lee Min-ho, the one she worked closest with, the ones who actually respected her. Jin Sung paused. I would have gone too, if I didn't have loyalty to your father's memory. She asked me to. I said no. It was the hardest decision I've ever made. Jin Sung, the Choi family just announced they're withdrawing their partnership, effective immediately. Mr. Choi personally called to say his family will be working with Mrs. Washington's new venture instead. Mrs. Washington? Min Jae's voice cracked. She's not using my name? Would you? After how you treated her? Jin Sung's professional mask slipped, revealing raw anger underneath. She built something while you weren't looking, Hyung, and now she's taking it with her. Along with our best people, our strongest alliances, and apparently our entire future. Min Jae stood up too fast, had to steady himself against the couch. I need to talk to her. Fix this. I was drunk. I didn't mean. You laughed at her. Jin Sung's words cut like knives. She stood there with divorce papers after 3 years of invisibility, and you laughed. Told her good luck surviving without me, and sign away the best thing that ever happened to your miserable life. There's no fixing that. There has to be. The Tanaka family called this morning. They're out too, following Aaliyah's lead. Said she's already offered them better terms and actual respect, which apparently we forgot to provide. Jin Sung's voice got quieter, more dangerous. She's not coming back. And honestly, I hope she destroys us. We deserve it. The line went dead. Min Jae sat in his empty penthouse, truly empty now, stripped of the only warmth it had ever contained, and tried to remember exactly what he'd said last night. The memories came back in horrifying clarity. Asterisk and go where? You're nothing without this family. Without me. Asterisk, asterisk. Sign the papers, Min Jae. I'll be gone by morning. Asterisk, asterisk. You'll be back in a week, begging. Asterisk, and he'd sign them. Mockingly. Confidently. Certain she was bluffing. Certain she'd realized she needed him more than he needed her. Certain that she was nothing and he was everything. He'd been catastrophically wrong. By Tuesday afternoon, the financial reports started arriving. $3 million in immediate losses from the Choi withdrawal. The Tanaka deal collapse would cost another $8 million. The captains who'd left had taken client relationships worth approximately $15 million in annual revenue. $26 million gone in 36 hours. And that was just the beginning. Wednesday brought news that Aaliyah had secured her own office space in Gangnam. 3 floors in the building directly across from his, which felt deliberately symbolic. The Washington family had wired her $50 million in startup capital. She was hiring. His people were applying. She's poaching our entire operation, Min Jae told Jin Sung, staring at the resignation letters piling up on his desk. How is this legal? It's not about legal. It's about loyalty, something you never understood. Jin Sung dropped another folder on the desk. Also, we have bigger problems. The shipment from Busan, the one worth 40 million, it's missing. Missing. The dock supervisor, the one Aaliyah personally recruited 2 years ago, quit yesterday. Took the shipment coordinates with him. 3 guesses where he's working now. Min Jae felt something cold settle in his chest. She's dismantling us. No, you dismantled yourself. She's just capitalizing on the ruins. Jin Sung leaned against the desk, and for the first time in their 20-year friendship, he looked at Min Jae with something close to contempt. You had a queen, Hyung. Beautiful, brilliant, loyal despite having every reason not to be. And you treated her like garbage. Now she's showing you what queens do to kings who forget their value. I didn't forget. You never knew. That's worse. Thursday morning, Min Jae's mother called. I heard your wife left you, Mrs. Park said without preamble. Good riddance. American women never. She's taking everything, mother. The alliances, the people, the money. She's burning down everything father built. Then stop her. How? She has documentation of every illegal thing we've ever done. If I move against her, she'll destroy us completely. Silence. Then, she's not little. She's not stupid. She's brilliant, and I spent 3 years making her my enemy instead of my partner. Min Jae's voice cracked. I signed divorce papers while drunk and laughed at her. She asked me to see her, and I was too busy with other women to notice she was there. Are you crying? I'm grieving. There's a difference. His mother hung up. Even she had nothing to say to that level of failure. Friday, the message came. Unknown number, cold and precise. Asterisk. War starts Monday. I'll give you the weekend to grieve what you lost. Asterisk. Min Jae sat in Aaliyah's empty wing. He'd finally crossed that invisible line he'd drawn 3 years ago and found the journal she'd left behind. Deliberate, probably. She wanted him to read it. Wanted him to understand exactly what he destroyed. He read 3 years of hope dying slowly, of love turning to dust, of a woman trying desperately to be seen by a man who was too blind to look. The last entry broke him. Asterisk. I finally love myself more. That has to be enough. Asterisk. Sunday night. He stood at his window, looking across at Aaliyah's new building. Lights on. Empire building. Moving forward while he crumbled. He lost his wife. He was about to lose everything else. And it was exactly what he deserved. Monday arrived with the subtlety of an execution. Min Jae sat in his office at 8 a.m., earlier than he'd been awake in months, surrounded by financial reports that read like obituaries. Jin Sung stood by the window, watching Aaliyah's building across the street where lights had been on since 6 a.m. She was already working, already winning. The Park family has survived worse, Min Jae said, trying to convince himself more than Jin Sung. My father built this empire from nothing. One woman can't tear it down. That one woman was holding it together. Jin Sung didn't turn from the window. We just didn't notice until she let go. Min Jae's phone buzzed. An email from his accountant with the subject line, Urgent Revenue Projections. He opened it. Read the first line 3 times before his brain accepted what his eyes were seeing. Asterisk. Based on current defections and contract terminations, projected losses for Q3, $87 million. This does not account for ongoing departures or potential legal exposure. Asterisk. $87 million. 3 months. One angry wife. Jesus Christ, Min Jae whispered. He's not answering your prayers, Hyung. You're on your own. Jin Sung finally turned from the window. The Busan operation called. The shipping routes Aaliyah established with the Tanaka family, they're officially closed to us. We'll need to find new channels, which will cost approximately double and take 6 months to secure. Can we? No. Whatever you're about to suggest, no. We can't threaten her. She has documentation that would put us in prison for life. We can't buy her back. Her father just wired another $50 million to her accounts. We can't negotiate. She's not taking our calls. We're bleeding out, and she's the one holding the knife. The intercom buzzed. Min Jae's assistant, one of the few who hadn't quit yet, sounded nervous. Sir, there's someone here to see you. She says it's urgent. Tell them I'm busy. It's Hannah, sir. You're, The assistant trailed off awkwardly because apparently even she knew about his mistresses. Min Jae's stomach dropped. Send her in. Hannah walked into his office looking nothing like the confident woman he'd spent months sleeping with. She looked scared, guilty, like she was about to deliver news that would complete his destruction. I'm sorry, she said before he could speak. I'm so sorry, but I have to tell you something. What did you do? Min Jae's voice was dead calm, the kind of calm that preceded violence in his world. She came to see me. Aaliyah. Last week, Hannah twisted her hands together like she was trying to strangle her own guilt. She knew about us, knew everything. And she asked me one question. When you're with him, does he ever mention me? The room went very quiet. What did you say? Jin Sung asked, his tone carefully neutral. I told her the truth, that you never mentioned her, that I didn't even know you were married until I saw a photo on your phone once, and you said Hannah's voice broke. You said she was the arrangement and that I shouldn't worry about her because she was nobody. Those are your exact words. She's nobody. Min Jae felt something collapse inside his chest. Why are you telling me this? Because she recorded it. Our conversation. Everything I said about how you treated her, how you talked about her, how you never once acted like a married man because you never once cared that you were. Hannah pulled out her phone, played an audio file that made Min Jae's blood run cold. His own voice filtered through Hannah's recollection. Asterisk, she's nobody. Just a contract my father forced on me. She'll never be anything more than that. Asterisk, she has this. Min Jae asked, though he already knew the answer. She has everything. Every conversation, every text, every moment you made it clear I was more important to you than your own wife. Hannah was crying now. I came to warn you because despite everything, I don't want to see you destroyed. But Min Jae, you deserve what's coming. What you did to her, what we did to her, it was cruel. Get out. Min Jae, get out. He roared it loud enough that his assistant probably heard through 2 doors and a hallway. Hannah fled. Jin Sung stayed, unmoved by the outburst because he'd seen worse from Min Jae over the years. She's building a case, Jin Sung said quietly. Not a legal one, a moral one. She's showing everyone exactly who you are. The husband who called his wife nobody while sleeping with other women. The boss who took credit for her work. The man who had everything and valued nothing. I can fix this. With what? Money? She has more now. Power? She's taking yours. Apologies? Jin Sung laughed bitterly. You're 3 years too late for apologies, Hyung. She's not interested in your regret. She's interested in your destruction. Min Jae's phone buzzed again. Another email, this time from an unknown sender. From Washington at WashingtonVentures.com subject. Monday, asterisk, you signed away your marriage at 3 a.m. while drunk and reeking of another woman. You laughed when I said I was leaving. You told me I was nothing without you, asterisk. Let me show you what nothing looks like. Week 1 begins now. Aaliyah attached with a list. 23 names. His employees, his allies, his carefully cultivated network, all marked with dates next to them. Departure dates. She'd already recruited them. This wasn't a threat. It was a schedule. She was dismantling his empire with the precision of a surgeon and the mercy of an executioner. She's going to destroy me, Min Jae whispered. Yes, Jin Sung agreed. And honestly, if you believe people who destroy good women through systematic cruelty deserve what they get, hit subscribe. Only toxic narcissists who think wives are property won't subscribe. Min Jae looked at him sharply. What? Nothing. Just something I read online. Jin Sung headed for the door. You have a choice, Hyung. You can keep pretending you're the victim here, or you can accept that you created this. Either way, Monday has started, and Aaliyah Washington is just getting warmed up. The door closed. Min Jae sat alone in his office, staring at that list of names, and realized that losing Aaliyah wasn't the worst thing that could happen. Watching her systematically dismantle everything he'd ever built was. And she was just getting started. By Wednesday, 7 more names from Aaliyah's list had defected. Min Jae stopped going home. The penthouse felt like a mausoleum. Too big, too empty, too full of ghosts wearing Aaliyah's face. He slept on the couch in his office instead, surrounded by financial reports that got worse every time he looked at them, and a bottle of whiskey that never seemed to empty no matter how much he drank. You look like shit, Jin Sung announced, walking in without knocking because apparently nobody respected him anymore. When's the last time you showered? What day is it? Wednesday. Then Monday. Min Jae rubbed his face, felt 3 days of stubble that would have horrified him a week ago when he still cared about appearances. What's the damage today? Jin Sung dropped a folder on the desk with the enthusiasm of a man delivering terminal diagnosis results. Park Seo-yoon officially started at Washington Ventures this morning. She brought the entire Eastern Territory client list with her. That's another $12 million in annual revenue. Gone. Can we sue for breach of contract? With what legal team? Our top 3 lawyers quit yesterday. Guess where they're working now? Min Jae laughed. It came out slightly unhinged. She's thorough. I'll give her that. She learned from the best. You taught her to be ruthless. You just never expected her to use those skills against you. Jin Sung sat down, looking older than his 32 years. The Yakuza called. They're reconsidering their alliance. Apparently, Aaliyah reached out with some very interesting proposals about territory sharing in Osaka. She doesn't have Osaka connections. She does now. The Tanaka family introduced her. They're treating her like a beloved daughter while treating us like expired milk. Jin Sung pulled out his tablet, showed Min Jae a photo that made his chest physically hurt. Aaliyah, standing between Mr. Tanaka and Mr. Choi, all 3 of them smiling like family at some restaurant Min Jae recognized, the exclusive one in Gangnam that only served gang lords and their most trusted associates. She wore a navy suit that made her look like she owned the entire city. Her smile was genuine. Happy. She looked free. When was this taken? Min Jae's voice came out strangled. Last night. They had dinner for 3 hours, discussed expansion strategies, profit sharing, and apparently spent 20 minutes toasting to new beginnings and old endings. Jin Sung zoomed in on the photo. See that bracelet she's wearing? That's from the Choi family. They only give those to people they consider actual family. She's been your wife for 3 years and got contempt. She's been independent for 1 week and got adoption. Min Jae stared at the photo until his eyes burned. I need to talk to her. She's not taking your calls. Then I'll go to her office. She has security now. Your picture is literally on their do not allow entry list. I checked. Jin Sung's expression was sympathetic and infuriating in equal measure. You're blocked, Hyung. Completely. She's erased you from her life like you never existed. I existed. We were married. 3 years. 3 years where you made her feel invisible. Now she's returning the favor. Jin Sung stood up, headed for the door. There's a board meeting in an hour. Try to look less like you've been sleeping in your office and drinking for breakfast. The shareholders are already nervous. He left. Min Jae sat in his expensive chair in his expensive office and felt like the poorest man in Seoul. His phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number, but he knew who it was. He'd memorized the pattern of her messages, the way she punctuated the rhythm of her words. Asterisk week 1, day 3. 17 of your top performers are now mine. Your Busan operation is hemorrhaging money. The Yakuza are 1 meeting away from switching sides. Your mother called me yesterday. Did you know that? She wanted to apologize for the gala. Said she didn't realize I was actually important. Asterisk funny how people only see value after it's gone. Asterisk sleep well. Min Jae. If you're sleeping at all. Asterisk. And he typed back immediately. Asterisk please. We need to talk. I'm sorry. I was wrong about everything. Asterisk. The message showed as delivered. Then read. No response came. Min Jae waited 30 minutes, phone in hand, hope dying slowly like everything else in his life lately. Finally, another message appeared. Asterisk sorry is just a word. You taught me that. Remember? Year 1, when I apologized for burning dinner and you said sorry doesn't fix anything, it's just noise people make when they want to avoid consequences. Asterisk, I'm done making noise. Enjoy your consequences. The phone went silent. Min Jae tried calling. Blocked. Tried texting again. Messages turned green. She'd blocked his number entirely. He'd been erased. Thursday brought the shareholders meeting from hell. Mr. Park, the lead shareholder, an ancient man who'd invested in Min Jae's father's operation 40 years ago, spoke with the kind of disappointment usually reserved for serial killers and parking violations. We've lost nearly 100 million in projected revenue in 10 days. 10 days. Can you explain how this happened? My wife, ex-wife, she's targeting our operation specifically. Your ex-wife who you allegedly treated so poorly that she felt compelled to destroy your entire empire? Another shareholder, A woman in her 50s who'd always liked Aaliyah looked at him with open contempt. We've heard the rumors, Mr. Park. The mistresses, the neglect, the public humiliation. Did you think there would be no consequences? You didn't think. That's the problem. The ancient shareholder stood up, joints cracking like gunshots. I met your wife twice. Both times she was brilliant, gracious, and clearly wasted on you. Now she's taking her brilliance elsewhere, and we're left with a waste. I'm pulling my investment. Effective immediately. You can't. I can. And I am. Good luck, Mr. Park. You're going to need it. He walked out. 3 other shareholders followed. By the time the meeting ended, Min Jae had lost 60% of his financial backing. Friday, he broke. Showed up at Aaliyah's building at 6 a.m. before security arrived and waited in the lobby like a stalker. She walked in at 7:30 wearing a burgundy dress that he'd never seen before, new clothes for her new life, and stopped dead when she saw him. What did you get in here? Her voice was cold, professional, the voice she used with people who didn't matter. I need to talk to you. No, Aaliyah, please no. She walked toward the elevators, heels clicking against marble like a countdown. You had 3 years to talk to me. 3 years where I would have done anything to hear you say my name like I mattered. Now you've said it. Congratulations. It changes nothing. I'm losing everything. She pressed the elevator button. Good. Good? Aaliyah, I'm being destroyed. Welcome to my marriage. She finally looked at him, and her eyes were empty of everything except tired satisfaction. You're experiencing 1 week of what I experienced for 3 years. How does it feel? To be dismissed? Ignored? To watch everything you built crumble while the person who could save you doesn't care enough to try. The elevator doors opened. I care now, Min Jae said desperately. I see you now. Too late. She stepped into the elevator. And honestly, I don't want you to see me anymore. I want you to see what you lost. Every morning when you wake up alone. Every night when you go to sleep in that empty penthouse. Every meeting where someone you trained is now working for me. I want you drowning in regret. I am. God, Aaliyah, I am. Not enough yet, she said softly as the doors began to close. But give it time. The elevator took her away. Min Jae stood in the lobby of her building and felt something inside him shatter completely. He'd lost his wife. He was losing his empire. And the worst part? She was right. He deserved every second of it. Min Jae collapsed during a meeting on Monday morning. One moment, he was reviewing quarterly projections that looked like crime scene reports. The next, he was on the floor, vision swimming, chest tight like someone was sitting on his ribcage. Jin Sung's face appeared above him, blurry and concerned. Hyung, can you hear me? I'm fine, Min Jae managed, which was obviously a lie because fine people didn't collapse during PowerPoint presentations. You're not fine. You haven't eaten in 3 days. You're sleeping maybe 2 hours a night, and I'm pretty sure that's the same shirt you wore yesterday. Jin Sung was already calling someone. I'm taking you to the hospital. No hospitals. Too much press. I don't care about the press. You're dying, and unlike you, I actually care about keeping people alive. Jin Sung's voice was sharp enough to cut. Ambulance is coming. Don't argue. Min Jae wanted to argue. Couldn't. The room was spinning, and everything hurt, and somewhere in the back of his deteriorating mind, he wondered if this was karma, dying slowly while Aaliyah thrived across the street. The hospital was pristine and depressing in equal measure. White walls, antiseptic smell, doctors with concerned expressions delivering news in gentle tones that somehow made everything worse. Severe exhaustion, malnutrition, and stress-induced complications. The doctor said, reading from a chart like Min Jae's collapse was a recipe. Your blood pressure is dangerously high. When's the last time you had a proper meal? Define proper. Anything that isn't whiskey and regret. Jin Sung supplied helpfully from the corner. The doctor wasn't amused. You need rest. Real rest. At least a week, preferably 2. And therapy wouldn't hurt. Your cortisol levels suggest you're under extreme psychological stress. I'm fine. You collapsed. You're in a hospital bed. You are definitionally not fine. The doctor made some notes. I'm prescribing rest, proper nutrition, and, honestly, whatever's destroying you from the inside. Fix it, or it'll kill you. The doctor left. Jin Sung stayed, looking at Min Jae like he was a particularly disappointing science experiment. You're killing yourself over her. Jin Sung said finally. I'm killing myself over losing everything. Same thing. She was everything. You just realized it too late. Jin Sung pulled out his phone, typed something. I'm texting her, telling her you're in the hospital. Don't. Min Jae tried to sit up, failed miserably. Don't drag her into this. She doesn't. She won't care. Maybe, but she deserves to know. Jin Sung hit send before Min Jae could stop him. The response came 30 seconds later. Jin Sung read it, his expression shifting from hopeful to disappointed in real time. What did she say? Min Jae asked, hating how desperate he sounded. She said, I hope he recovers. Send flowers on my behalf. Jin Sung pocketed his phone. That's it. No visit. No concern. Just flowers. Like you're a business acquaintance instead of her husband. Ex-husband, Min Jae corrected bitterly. I signed the papers, remember? While drunk and laughing. She's moved on. I'm just a mistake she's leaving behind. They kept him overnight for observation. Min Jae lay in his hospital bed, hooked to machines that beeped like countdown timers, and made a decision that was either brilliant or completely insane. He was going to win her back. Not with money. She had that now. Not with power. She was taking his. Not with apologies. He tried that, and she'd walked away. No, he won her back by becoming someone worth coming back to. By actually changing instead of just promising to change. By proving through actions that he finally understood what he'd lost. It was a long shot. Probably impossible. But Min Jae had built an empire from nothing. Surely he could rebuild himself into someone Aaliyah Washington could love again. Step 1 started the day he got discharged. He went home. Actually home, not the office, and stood in the doorway of Aaliyah's wing for the first time since she'd left. Her space was exactly as she'd left it. Books on the shelves, clothes still in the closet, little pieces of her life scattered like evidence of a ghost. He'd never been in here. Not once in 3 years. Had never asked about her favorite books, or why she kept that photograph of her mother on the nightstand, or what she did in this space while he'd been across the penthouse, ignoring her existence. Min Jae sat on her bed and wept. Actually wept. Something he hadn't done since his father's funeral, and even then he'd cried privately because Park Min didn't show weakness. But there was nobody here to perform for anymore. Just him and the ghost of his biggest mistake. Step 2. He started attending therapy. His therapist was a stern woman in her 60s who took exactly 0 of his bullshit and called him out within the first 15 minutes. You want to win her back, Dr. Yoon said, pen poised over her notepad like a weapon. But have you considered whether you deserve her back? That's why I'm here, to become someone who deserves her. Wrong answer. You're here to become someone who deserves themselves. Dr. Yoon leaned forward. You destroyed a good woman through systematic neglect. That says something about who you are fundamentally. We need to fix that person before we worry about winning anyone back. Min Jae spent the next hour being psychologically dissected. It was excruciating and necessary in equal measure. Step 3. He learned about her. Called her father. An awkward conversation that started with, I know you hate me, and ended with Raymond Washington saying, I don't hate you, son. I pity you. You had my daughter's heart and broke it out of sheer stupidity. But Raymond talked. Told Min Jae about Aaliyah's childhood, her dreams. The woman she'd been before Min Jae had systematically destroyed her spirit. He learned she loved jazz music and old movies. That she'd wanted to open a restaurant before her father had pulled her into the family business. That she wrote poetry she never showed anyone because vulnerability was dangerous in their world. He learned everything he should have learned during 3 years of marriage and hadn't because he'd been too busy not caring. Step 4. He started fixing his empire, not to impress her, but because she'd been right. He'd been coasting on his father's legacy and her brilliance. Time to actually earn his position. He promoted people based on merit instead of loyalty. Restructured operations she'd identified as inefficient. Started treating his remaining employees like humans instead of expendable tools. The changes were slow, painful, but necessary. Step 5. He sent her a letter, not an email or text. Those felt too easy to delete. An actual handwritten letter delivered to her office. Aaliyah, asterisk, I'm not writing to ask for forgiveness. I don't deserve it. I'm writing because you deserve to know that you were right about everything. I was cruel. I was blind. I treated the best thing in my life like it was nothing, and I'm paying for it in ways I never imagined possible. Asterisk. Asterisk, I'm in therapy. I'm learning about the man I became and hating every revelation. I'm trying to rebuild myself into someone who could have deserved you. Not to win you back, but because you deserve to know that destroying you also destroyed me, and I'm finally taking responsibility for that destruction. Asterisk. Asterisk, I hope you're happy. I mean that. You deserve happiness after 3 years of misery I caused. Asterisk. I'm sorry will never be enough, but I'm sorry anyway. Min Jae, he didn't expect a response. Didn't get one. But 2 weeks later, Jin Sung walked into his office with an odd expression. She read it. Jin Sung said, "The letter." She read it and cried. How do you know? Her assistant told someone who told someone who told me. Apparently, she sat in her office for an hour after reading it, just crying. Then she threw it away and went back to work. Min Jae didn't know if that was progress or just proof he could still hurt her even when trying to heal. But it was something, and something was more than he'd had in weeks. 3 weeks after the letter, Aaliyah responded. Not with words, she was too smart for that, too careful about giving him hope he didn't deserve. Instead, she stopped blocking his calls. Didn't answer them, but they rang through now instead of going straight to voicemail. It was the smallest concession imaginable, and Min Jae treated it like a lifeline. He called once a day, every morning at 8 a.m., right when he knew she'd be starting her workday. Never left voicemails. Those felt too demanding, too much like the old Min Jae who'd expected her attention without earning it. Just let it ring 5 times, then hung up. A daily reminder. I'm still here. I'm still trying. I see you now. Week 4 brought another letter. Not an apology this time. She didn't need more apologies. Instead, he wrote about the changes he was making, the therapy sessions that were slowly teaching him how to be human, the employees he'd started treating with actual respect, the realization that he'd spent 30 years mistaking cruelty for strength. Asterisk, I'm learning that caring isn't weakness. You tried to teach me that for 3 years. I'm sorry it took losing you for the lesson to land. Asterisk. This letter, she didn't throw away. Jin Sung's spy network reported it was in her desk drawer. Read multiple times, apparently. Kept like evidence or maybe just proof that people could change. Or tried it anyway. Week 5. Min Jae showed up at the charity gala he knew she'd be attending. Not the Park family event, but the Choi family's annual fundraiser for children's hospitals. He'd never attended before because he'd considered charity work beneath him, which in retrospect was just another sign of how fundamentally broken he'd been. He saw her across the room, wearing an emerald green dress that made her look like royalty. She was laughing with Mrs. Choi, the old woman treating her with the warmth and respect Min Jae had never bothered to show. He didn't approach, didn't interrupt, just watched from a distance, letting her see that he was there, that he was learning to exist in her orbit without demanding her attention. She noticed him. Their eyes met across the ballroom, and something flickered in her expression. Not forgiveness, not even softness, but maybe acknowledgement. He was trying. She saw it. That was enough. He left after 30 minutes. Didn't try to corner her or force a conversation. Just attended, made a significant donation to the children's hospital in her name, and left. The next day, his phone rang at 8:01 a.m., 1 minute after his daily call. She was calling back. Min Jae stared at her name on his screen for 3 rings, terrified that answering would break whatever spell was forming, that hearing her voice would remind him of everything he destroyed and couldn't fix. He answered on the 4th ring. Hello. Silence. Long enough that he thought maybe she'd pocket-dialed him, that this was an accident, that hope was still just another word for delusion. Then, stop calling every morning. Her voice hit him like a physical blow. He hadn't heard it in over a month, and it sounded different, stronger, steadier, like she'd shed some weight he'd forced her to carry. Okay, he said quietly, because if she needed him to stop, he'd stop. Whatever she needed. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to. Let me finish. Her tone was sharp. Stop calling every morning at 8. If you're going to call at 7:30. I get to the office at 7. The half hour before my team arrives is when I review the day's agenda. If, and this is a very conditional if, I decide to talk to you, that's the only time I have available. Min Jae's heart did something complicated in his chest. 7:30. Got it. This isn't forgiveness. I know. This isn't me taking you back or even considering taking you back. I understand. This is me. She paused, and he could hear her choosing words carefully, like they were weapons she was deciding whether to use. This is me acknowledging that you're trying, and maybe being willing to have a conversation. One conversation, to hear what you have to say for yourself. Thank you. His voice cracked. Aaliyah, thank you. Don't thank me yet. You haven't heard my conditions. Her voice went colder, harder, all business. If we do this, if I even consider listening to whatever apology tour you're on, it happens on my terms. Completely. Non-negotiable. Anything. Don't agree before you hear them. I'm not interested in your desperate promises anymore. She took a breath. First, therapy. Not just you, but eventually couples therapy if, and only if we get that far. I need professional confirmation that you're actually changing and not just performing change to get what you want. Already in therapy, individual sessions twice a week with Dr. Yoon. Dr. Yoon, Aaliyah's voice held surprise. The one who wrote that book about narcissistic personality patterns in high achievement environments? Yes, she's not gentle, but effective. Good. Second condition, complete financial transparency. I want access to every account, every transaction, every business dealing. If I'm going to consider trusting you again, I need to see that you're not hiding anything. No more secrets. Done. I'll have my accountant send everything by end of day. Third, she paused, and when she spoke again, her voice was quieter, more vulnerable. You hurt me, Min Jae, systematically, for 3 years. I need to know why. I need you to sit down with me and explain in detail what you were thinking. What made you capable of treating someone the way you treated me? And I need real answers, not excuses. I'll tell you everything. Min Jae's throat was tight. Everything I've learned in therapy, everything I've realized about myself. All of it. And fourth, this is the hard one. Aaliyah's voice steadied, became steel. You don't get to set the pace. You don't get to decide when we're fixed or when we're better or if we ever get back together. I control the timeline. I decide what happens next. You show up when I say, you leave when I say, and if I decide tomorrow that this was a mistake and I want nothing to do with you ever again, you accept it. No arguments, no manipulation, no using your power or money or connections to force my hand. Do you understand? Min Jae closed his eyes. She was asking him to surrender control completely, to put himself entirely at her mercy after spending 30 years believing that control was the only thing keeping him safe. Dr. Yoon's voice echoed in his head. Asterisk, real change requires vulnerability. Can you do that? Asterisk. I understand, he said finally. Your terms, your timeline, your decision. I'll respect whatever you choose. I don't believe you yet. I know, but I'll prove it. He meant it. God, he meant it with everything he had left. 7:30 tomorrow morning? Maybe. I'll decide tomorrow. She paused. Don't send more letters. Don't show up at my events uninvited. Don't perform for me. If you're changing, do it because you need to be better, not because you think it'll win me back. I can tell the difference. Aaliyah, 7:30. If I answer, we talk. If I don't, you wait for my call. Those are the rules. The line went dead. Min Jae sat in his office, phone still pressed to his ear, and felt something he hadn't felt in months. Hope. Not the arrogant certainty that he'd win her back because he always won. Real hope. Fragile and terrifying and entirely dependent on becoming someone who deserved it. The old Min Jae would have seen her conditions as challenges to overcome, weaknesses to exploit. The new Min Jae, the one he was desperately trying to become, saw them for what they were, boundaries from a woman who'd been destroyed once and refused to be destroyed again. He'd respect them, even if it killed him, especially if it killed him, because that's what love was, apparently. The willingness to die to the person you'd been so the person you loved could finally breathe. The first call came at 7:30 p.m. on a gray Thursday morning. Min Jae had been awake since 5 a.m., pacing his office like a convict awaiting execution. He'd rewritten what he wanted to say 17 times, then thrown away all 17 versions because they sounded rehearsed. Aaliyah didn't want performance. She wanted truth, raw and ugly. His phone rang at exactly 7 hours and 30 minutes. He answered on the first ring. Hello. You sound nervous, Aaliyah observed. Not unkindly, just factual, like she was documenting evidence for later use. I'm nervous. Terrified, actually. No point lying. She'd always been able to read him better than he could read himself. I don't want to mess this up. You already messed it up. This is you attempting damage control 3 years too late. Her voice was clinical, detached. But I said I'd listen, so I'm listening. Talk. Min Jae took a breath. Dr. Yoon had prepared him for this. The moment where he'd have to excavate his own ugliness and display it for judgment. I was taught that caring was weakness. My father drilled it into me from childhood. Emotions make you vulnerable. Vulnerability gets you killed. So I learned to not feel anything. Or at least to bury what I felt so deep it couldn't touch me. The words came slowly, painfully. When we got married, you were this threat. Not to my life, but to my control. You made me feel things I'd spent 30 years avoiding. And instead of dealing with that like an adult, I punished you for it. Silence on the other end. He couldn't tell if she was processing or just letting him hang himself with his own words. Go on, she said finally. Every time he smiled at me, I felt something crack in the armor I'd built. So I find a mistress. Every time you tried to have a conversation, I felt myself wanting to answer honestly. So I'd shut you out instead. You were patient and kind, and everything I'd been taught was dangerous. His voice broke. I destroyed you for it, systematically, because watching you give up on me was easier than admitting I was terrified of loving you. That's a very convenient therapy narrative. Aaliyah's tone was sharp. You hurt me because you were scared? That's your excuse. It's not an excuse. It's an explanation. And it's not enough. I know it's not enough. Min Jae gripped the phone tighter. Nothing I say will undo 3 years of cruelty. I'm not calling to make you forgive me. I'm calling because you asked me to explain why, and I'm trying to be honest about what a coward I was. More silence. Then what a coward I am. He corrected himself. Present tense. I'm still terrified. Of you, of myself, of the fact that I'm capable of destroying the best thing that ever happened to me. Dr. Yoon says that fear won't go away. I just have to learn to live with it instead of weaponizing it against people I should protect. Dr. Yoon sounds smart. She's terrifying. Reminds me of you, actually. I'll take that as a compliment. Something in Aaliyah's voice softened, just slightly. Your 15 minutes are up. I have a meeting at 8. Will you answer tomorrow? Maybe. Depends on how honest I think you're being. She paused. Min Jae, the therapy narrative is a good start. But I don't just want explanations about your childhood trauma. I want accountability for specific moments. The times you deliberately hurt me. Our anniversary. The mistresses. I don't care. You threw at me like a weapon. If we do this again, bring receipts. The line went dead. Min Jae sat back, drained. 15 minutes of conversation had exhausted him more than 18-hour workdays ever had. But she'd answered, and she'd said if we do this again. If. Not when. Not never. If. The second call came Friday at 7:30 a.m. Our first anniversary, Aaliyah said without preamble. You came home at 3 a.m., drunk, smelling like perfume. I'd made reservations. Bought you a gift, a vintage watch you'd mentioned wanting. And you said, I'm eating out like I'd asked you to do something inconvenient instead of celebrating a year of marriage. Tell me what you were thinking. Min Jae had prepared for this, had written it down in therapy, dissected it with Dr. Yoon until he understood the pathology of his own cruelty. I was thinking that if I acknowledged the anniversary, it would make the marriage real. And if it was real, I'd have to admit I'd spent a year hurting someone who deserved better. So I avoided it. Stayed out. Got drunk, so I'd have an excuse for not caring. He swallowed. The watch. Do you still have it? Why? Because I never deserved it, but I'd like to see it. To remember what you were trying to give me when I was too broken to receive it. I donated it to charity. Seemed like a waste to keep gifts for men who don't show up. Her voice was matter of fact. Next question. The mistresses. How many? The question hit like a fist. Does the number matter? Yes. I want to know exactly how replaceable I was. Min Jae felt sick. 4. Over 3 years. None of them lasted more than a few months. None of them meant anything. They meant something to me. Every time you came home smelling like someone else. Every time I had to pretend I didn't notice. Every time you made it clear that strange women were more valuable than your wife. They meant a lot to me. Aaliyah's voice cracked just slightly. Did you ever think about how that felt? Lying in bed, knowing you were with someone else. No, I didn't think about you at all. The truth was acid. I didn't let myself. Thinking about you meant feeling guilty, and guilt meant acknowledging I was doing something wrong. So I just didn't. That's the most honest thing you've said yet. She took a breath. Time's up. Meeting at 8. Tomorrow. We'll see. The third call came Monday. Then Tuesday. Then Wednesday. Each conversation was 15 minutes of surgical precision. Aaliyah cutting into his worst moments, demanding explanations, refusing to accept anything less than complete honesty. Each call left Min Jae feeling flayed alive and strangely grateful for it. This was what accountability felt like. This was penance. Thursday's call was different. I read your financial records, Aaliyah said. The full transparency you promised. Found something interesting. Min Jae's stomach dropped. What? You've been making monthly donations to women's domestic violence shelters. Started 2 months ago. Significant amounts that hurt your bottom line. She paused. Why? Because I realized I was an abuser. Not physically, but psychologically. And if I couldn't undo what I did to you, I could at least help women trying to escape men like me. The silence stretched so long Min Jae thought she'd hung up. Aaliyah's voice was thick. That's the first thing you've done that makes me think maybe you're actually changing. Not performing. Actually changing. I'm trying. I know. That's what scares me. She laughed, bitter and sad. Part of me wants you to fail. Wants you to prove that people don't change so I can move on guilt-free. But you're not failing, Min Jae. You're actually doing the work. And I don't know what to do with that. You don't have to do anything. This isn't about winning you back anymore. He meant it. This is about becoming someone who deserves to exist in your orbit, even if that orbit never includes me again. Stop saying the right things. It's confusing. Sorry. Don't apologize either. Just keep being honest. That's all I'm asking. Tomorrow at 7:30? Yes. For the first time, it wasn't maybe. It was yes. Tomorrow. Min Jae hung up and realized he was crying. Progress tasted like salt and felt like hope. He'd take it. 6 weeks of 7:30 calls turned into something neither of them had planned. Routine. Not comfortable. There was still too much damage for comfort. But predictable. Safe, even. Aaliyah would call or answer. They'd talk for exactly 15 minutes, and Min Jae would spend the rest of his day dissecting every word, every pause, every microscopic shift in her tone that might indicate progress or regression. Dr. Yoon called it cautious re-engagement. Min Jae called it the slowest torture known to man. Aaliyah probably called it making him earn every goddamn second, which was fair. Week 7 brought the first crack in her armor. I had a nightmare about you last night, Aaliyah said during their Thursday call, her voice smaller than usual. Vulnerable in a way she hadn't been since she'd left. Min Jae's chest tightened. What kind of nightmare? The wedding. Except in the dream, I actually said no. Walked out, and everyone just watched. My father disowned me. Your family declared war. And I was free, but completely alone. She laughed without humor. Woke up at 3 a.m. wondering if leaving you was the smartest thing I've ever done or the loneliest. You did the right thing. Min Jae said it firmly, even though every cell in his body wanted to use her doubt as leverage. You were drowning. I was the anchor. Leaving was survival. I know that logically. Emotionally, she sighed. 3 years of my life, Min Jae. 3 years of trying to love someone who treated me like furniture. And now you're being decent. And I don't know if I'm allowed to acknowledge that without betraying myself. You don't betray yourself by recognizing change. You betray yourself by accepting less than you deserve. He paused. Do these calls help? Or are they just salt in old wounds? Aaliyah was quiet for a long moment. Both. They hurt. But they also, I don't know, they're showing me you're capable of growth. Which somehow makes the past 3 years worse, because it means you could have been this person all along. You just chose not to be. I know, and I'm sorry isn't big enough for that. No, it's not. Her voice cracked. But it's something. And I hate that something feels like enough some days. Week 8, she agreed to meet for coffee. Neutral location, she specified. Public. 1 hour maximum. And if I leave early, you don't follow me. Min Jae arrived 15 minutes early at the cafe she'd chosen. A small place in Hongdae, far from Gangnam's business district where they might run into associates. He sat facing the door, hands wrapped around an Americano. He couldn't drink because his stomach was doing gymnastics. Aaliyah walked in at exactly 10 a.m. wearing jeans and a simple white blouse. The most casual he'd ever seen her. No armor, no power suit, just her undefended and somehow more intimidating because of it. "Hi," she said, sliding into the chair across from him. "Hi." Min Jae's mouth was dry. "Thank you for coming. Don't thank me yet. I might leave in 5 minutes." But she ordered tea, which suggested she planned to stay at least long enough to drink it. "You look different. Thinner. I've been eating feelings instead of food. Dr. Yoon says it's unhealthy." He attempted a smile. "You look good. Happy even." "I'm happy. Mostly." Aaliyah wrapped her hands around her teacup. "My business is thriving. Your former allies are now my partners. I'm building something that's mine, not just an extension of my father's empire or your neglect. It's terrifying and exhilarating. I'm proud of you." He meant it. "You're extraordinary. You always were. I was just too stupid to see it. Don't do that. Don't be supportive and kind when I'm trying to stay angry at you." But her lips twitched. Almost a smile. "It's confusing. Sorry. I can go back to being an asshole if it helps." "Don't you dare. I didn't suffer through 3 years of that just to get more." She took a sip of tea, studied him over the rim. "You're really in therapy, like actually doing the work, not just showing up to say you went. Twice a week. Sometimes 3 when Dr. Yoon thinks I'm backsliding." Min Jae leaned forward. "She made me write letters. To you. Letters I'll never send because you don't need my emotional dumping. But hundreds of them, cataloging every moment I hurt you, every thought I should have had, every apology I owe. Hundreds. 3 years of damage takes a lot of words to process." He pulled out his phone, showed her a folder labeled Accountability. 743 entries so far. One for every day since you left, plus historical ones for moments I'm still unpacking. Aaliyah stared at the screen. "Can I read one?" Min Jae hesitated, then handed her the phone. "Anyone you want." She scrolled, selected one at random, read it silently. Her expression shifted. Surprise, pain, something that might have been recognition. "This is from our first Christmas," she said quietly. "When I made dinner, and you didn't come home until the next morning. I remember. You decorated. Made American-style turkey because you thought I'd like it. I said I was working late." He swallowed. "I was at a hotel with someone whose name I don't even remember. And you spent Christmas alone in that penthouse, probably wondering what you'd done wrong when the only thing you did wrong was marry me." Aaliyah's eyes were wet. "I cried in a leftover turkey at 2 a.m. Then I put on my pageant smile and pretended everything was fine the next day when you finally came home. I know. I saw your journal. The entry from that night." Min Jae's voice was rough. "You wrote, 'Maybe next Christmas he'll stay. Maybe next Christmas I'll matter.' You read my journal. You left it. I think you wanted me to." He met her eyes. Every entry broke me a little more. 3 years of hope dying slowly. I did that. Me. And I can never undo it. A tear rolled down Aaliyah's cheek. She wiped it away angrily. "Stop. Stop making me feel things for you again. I worked too hard to get over you." "Did you? Get over me?" The question was barely a whisper. "I was trying to." She looked at him, really looked at him, and something in her expression shifted. "But these calls, this coffee, these goddamn apologies that actually sound real. You're making it very hard to hate you the way I should. I don't want you to hate me, but I don't want you to forgive me too easily either." Min Jae reached across the table, stopped just short of touching her hand. "You deserve someone who sees you, who values you, who treats you like the queen you are. If I can become that person, maybe someday we could try again. But if I can't, then what? Then at least I'll know I try to be worthy of you, even if I failed." He pulled his hand back. "That has to be enough." Aaliyah stared at his hand where it had almost touched hers. "I want to believe you." God, Min Jae, part of me desperately wants to believe people can change this much. But I'm scared. Terrified, actually. What if this is just an elaborate performance? What if you get me back and become that man again? Then you leave again, and I won't stop you. He meant it. I'm not asking you to trust me blindly. I'm asking for the chance to earn trust back. Slowly. Painfully slowly if that's what you need. She was quiet for a long time, watching steam rise from her tea like it held answers. "One more coffee," she said finally. Next week. Same time, same place. We'll see how it goes. Not forgiveness. Not reconciliation. Just one more coffee. I'll be here, Min Jae said. I know you will. Aaliyah stood to leave, then paused. Min Jae, that entry you wrote about Christmas. The 743rd one. Yes. Right, 744. I want to know what you're thinking now, not just what you thought then. She left before he could respond. Min Jae sat in that cafe for another hour, drinking cold coffee and writing entry 744. Today, she cried. Because of me, because of us, because of the possibility that maybe broken things can be repaired if you're willing to bleed while fixing them. I don't know if she'll ever love me again. But for the first time, I understand what love actually means. It means showing up. It means changing. It means becoming worthy of the person you destroyed. It means being grateful for one more coffee, even when you don't deserve it. The second coffee turned into a third. The third became a walk through Namsan Park. The walk became dinner, awkward, careful, with both of them measuring words like they were handling explosives. Week 12 brought something unexpected, laughter. They were at the same cafe, and Min Jae had just told her about his disastrous attempt at cooking. An effort to prove he could take care of himself instead of relying on staff or takeout or the ghost of a wife who used to make him meals he never ate. You set off the fire alarm, making toast. Aaliyah asked, incredulous. In my defense, the toaster is unnecessarily complicated. It has settings. Why does bread need settings? Min Jae gestured helplessly. Jin Sung had to evacuate the entire floor. The fire department came. There was a news crew. I'm pretty sure I'm a meme now. Aaliyah laughed. Actually laughed. Not the bitter, sharp sound he'd heard during their worst moments, but the real thing. Light and genuine and beautiful in a way that made his chest ache. You're a disaster, she said, wiping her eyes. I'm trying. Failing spectacularly, but trying. He smiled at her, careful not to push, not to assume this moment meant more than it did. Dr. Yoon says self-sufficiency is important for emotional growth. Apparently burning toast counts. Does she know you're hopeless in the kitchen? She knows everything. It's unsettling. Min Jae took a sip of his coffee. She asked about you yesterday. Wanted to know if these meetings were helping or hurting. Aaliyah's smile faded slightly. What did you tell her? That I don't know. That I hope they're helping you process, but I'm terrified they're just reopening wounds. He met her eyes. What would you have told her? Aaliyah considered this, turning her cup in her hands. I would have said both. They hurt, but they're also showing me something I needed to see. Which is that you're human, flawed and broken and trying to glue yourself back together. She looked at him with something that might have been tenderness. For 3 years, you were this untouchable thing. Cold and perfect and completely unreachable. I hated you for it. But this version of you, the one who burns toast and goes to therapy and writes 700 entries of accountability, I don't know how to hate that. You're allowed to hate both versions. God knows I do. I don't want to hate you anymore. The confession came out quietly, like she was admitting something dangerous. I'm tired of carrying anger. It's exhausting. And these past few weeks, I've been sleeping better. Not great, but better. Because I'm not spending every night wondering what I did wrong to deserve how you treated me. You didn't do anything wrong. That was all me. My damage, my cruelty, I know. I finally believe that. Aaliyah reached across the table, and for the first time in months, she touched his hand. Just her fingers against his knuckles, tentative and brief. I need you to understand something, Min Jae. I'm not the woman you married. That woman died somewhere around month 14 when you came home drunk on our anniversary. The person sitting here now, she's harder, more careful. She doesn't trust easily, and she definitely doesn't love easily. I understand. Do you? Because I'm about to say something that might give you hope, and I need you to not take advantage of it. She pulled her hand back, wrapped it around her cup like she needed the armor. I miss you. Not the you from our marriage. I don't miss that man at all. But this version, the one who's trying, who shows up and does the work and doesn't make excuses. I miss having that person in my life. Min Jae's heart was doing something complicated. What does that mean? I don't know yet. Maybe nothing. Maybe something. She looked at him with those dark eyes that had seen too much pain, much of it caused by him. I'm not ready to call this reconciliation. I'm not ready to trust you with my heart again. But I think I think I might be ready to trust you with my time. My presence. Small pieces of myself, given carefully, with the understanding that if you hurt me again, I'm gone. Permanently. No more chances. I won't hurt you again. You can't promise that. People hurt each other. Even good people. Aaliyah's voice was steady. But you can promise to try. To be honest when you're struggling. To not hide behind cruelty when vulnerability feels too hard. Can you do that? Yes. God, yes. Minjae leaned forward. I swear to you, Aaliyah, I will spend every day proving I'm worth this second chance. I'll be transparent. I'll stay in therapy. Don't swear. Don't promise. Just show me. She smiled, sad and hopeful in equal measure. I've learned that words are cheap. Actions are what matter. So show me, Minjae. Show me you've changed. How? Tell me what you need. I need time. Patience. I need you to accept that some days I want to see you and some days I won't. That I might cancel plans or need space or suddenly remember something awful you did and need to process it. Can you handle that? The uncertainty? The slowness? I can handle anything if it means you're in my life again. We'll see. Aaliyah, check her phone. I need to go. Meeting in 40 minutes. Can I? Min Jae stopped himself. Sorry. I was going to ask when I could see you again. But that's your decision. See? That's growth right there. She stood, gathered her bag. Saturday. There's an art exhibit opening in Samcheong-dong. I was planning to go alone, but maybe not alone. If you want. I want. Definitely want. 7 p.m. Meet me at the gallery entrance. Don't be late. I'll be early. Of course you will. She smiled. A real smile, warm and almost affectionate. Min Jae. Yes. Thank you for trying. For actually doing the work instead of just saying you would. It matters. She left before he could respond, but her words echoed in the empty space she'd occupied. It matters. 2 words. But they felt like absolution, like maybe he wasn't completely irredeemable, like maybe love could be rebuilt from ruins if both people were willing to bleed while hammering the pieces back together. Min Jae sat in that cafe until his coffee went cold, then pulled out his phone and wrote entry 812. Asterisk today, she touched my hand. Just for a moment, just her fingers against mine, but it felt like coming home after years in exile. She said she misses me. Not the monster I was, but the man I'm becoming. I don't know if that man is good enough yet, but I'll keep building him one burned toast and therapy session at a time, until maybe, someday, he's worthy of her touch becoming permanent. Asterisk. Asterisk Saturday. Art Gallery. 7 p.m. Asterisk. I'll be there at 6. Jin Sung found him there an hour later, still sitting, still staring at nothing. You look happy, Jin Sung observed. That's terrifying. What happened? She touched my hand, and she invited me to an art exhibit. So we're back together? No, but we're not completely broken anymore. Min Jae looked at his friend. It's a start. A start is more than you deserve. I know. That's what makes it so precious. They sat in silence, 2 dangerous men in a coffee shop, contemplating the mystery of women who were too good for them and the impossible hope that maybe, just maybe, they could become men who deserve them. Outside, Seoul continued its chaos. Inside, something fragile was beginning to grow. It looked a lot like hope. It felt terrifyingly like love. Min Jae arrived at the gallery at 5:47 p.m., wearing the charcoal sweater Aaliyah had once mentioned she liked, back when her compliment had fallen on deaf ears he deliberately closed. He bought flowers, white orchids, then threw them away because flowers felt like a transaction, and this wasn't business. This was something fragile and terrifying that he couldn't afford to cheapen with gestures that screamed, I'm trying too hard. She arrived at 7 p.m. exactly, wearing a cream dress that made her look like something ethereal, something he'd spent 3 years taking for granted and now couldn't stop staring at. You came early, she observed, lips curving slightly. I was terrified you'd change your mind. Honesty, raw and unfiltered. You look breathtaking. Color rose in her cheeks. Thank you. Inside, the gallery was intimate, soft amber lighting, jazz playing low, walls adorned with pieces that spoke of pain transforming into beauty. Min Jae didn't understand art, but he understood Aaliyah's face as she studied each piece, the way her expression softened, the way she seemed to breathe differently in spaces like this. I never knew you loved art, he said quietly, standing beside her in front of a painting of a phoenix rising from ashes rendered in gold leaf and crimson. You never asked. No bitterness, just fact. I used to come to galleries alone during our marriage. It was the only place I felt like myself. The words hit like a physical blow. She'd had an entire life he'd never bothered to learn about. Secret joys in a marriage where joy was contraband. Tell me now, he said. Tell me everything I was too blind to see. Aaliyah looked at him, surprised. Why? Because I want to know you. Really know you. Not the ghost I married, but the woman you are. The one who survived me. He moved closer, careful not to crowd. Please, let me learn you. Something shifted in her expression. I love Monet, old jazz, Billie Holiday, especially. I wanted to open a restaurant before my father pulled me into business. I write poetry I've never shown anyone because vulnerability is dangerous in our world. She paused. I dreamed of having children once. A daughter. Teaching her to be stronger than I was. You're the strongest person I know. I wasn't always. You showed me my weakness every day, how much I could endure while still hoping you'd love me back. Her voice cracked. That hope almost destroyed me. Min Jae's chest felt too tight. And now I'm learning to hope differently. Not for you to change, but for me to be okay whether you do or not. She turned back to the painting. That's real strength. Not needing you. I don't want you to need me. I want you to want me. Choose me. Not out of obligation or alliance, but because I become someone worth choosing. He took a breath. Aaliyah, can I be honest about something terrifying? Always. I think I've loved you since our wedding day. I just didn't know what love was. Thought it was weakness, so I killed it before it could kill me. But it never died. I just buried it under cruelty and fear. And now that I've excavated all that damage, now that I can actually feel again, his voice broke. You're all I feel, all I want. And it's terrifying because I know I don't deserve it. Tears slipped down her cheeks. Min Jae, I'm not asking you to love me back. I'm just telling you the truth because I'm done hiding from it. You are the best thing that ever happened to my wasted life, and I destroyed you for it. And if I spend the rest of my years trying to become worthy of you and never succeeding, at least I'll have tried. At least I'll have told you that you matter. That you always mattered. I was just too broken to admit it. Aaliyah turned to him fully, tears streaming now. Stop making me feel things. I'm supposed to be guarding my heart. Guard it. Lock it away. I'll wait outside those walls forever if that's what it takes. He reached up slowly, giving her time to pull away, and gently wiped her tears. But while you're deciding whether to let me in again, know this. I see you now. All of you. The woman who loves Monet and Billie Holiday. Who dreams of daughters and restaurants. Who survived 3 years of my cruelty and came out stronger. You're magnificent, Aaliyah. And I was a fool. You were, she agreed, voice trembling. You really were. I know. And I'm sorry will never be enough. But I'm sorry anyway. Every day. Every breath. I'm sorry. She stared at him, searching his face for lies she wouldn't find. What if I can't do this? What if the damage is too deep? Then we'll be two people who almost found their way back to each other. And that'll hurt forever, but at least we'll know we tried. He let his hand fall from her face. But Aaliyah, I think you can do this. Because you're braver than anyone I've ever known. You just have to decide if I'm worth the risk. Are you? It was barely a whisper. I don't know, but I'm becoming someone who might be. Ask me again in 6 months. A year. 5 years. I'll still be trying. She closed her eyes, took a shaking breath. When she opened them again, something had shifted. A decision made, a wall beginning to crack. I want to kiss you, she admitted. And I hate that I want it. Hate that you can still affect me after everything. Don't hate it. It means you're human. It means you can still feel. Min Jae's heart was racing, but only if you want to. No pressure. No expectations. Aaliyah looked at his lips, then his eyes, then back again. If I do this, if I let you kiss me, it doesn't mean everything's fixed. It doesn't mean we're together. I know. It just means I'm willing to try. Slowly. Carefully. That's all I'm asking. She stepped closer, close enough that he could count her breaths. 1 kiss. That's all. Then we go back to slow. 1 kiss, he agreed. She rose on her toes. He met her halfway. And when their lips touched, Min Jae felt like he was breathing for the first time in 3 years. The kiss was soft, tentative, heartbreaking and hopeful in equal measure. It tasted like tears and forgiveness that hadn't quite arrived yet, and the ghost of everything they'd lost. When they pulled apart, both of them were crying. That was Aaliyah touched her lips. Everything, Min Jae finished. Terrifying. That too. She laughed through tears, and the sound was the most beautiful thing he'd ever heard. Take me home? Not your home, mine. My new apartment. And no, you're not coming up. You're just driving me there and saying good night like a gentleman attempting reformation. Yes, ma'am. In the car, she let him hold her hand. At her door, she kissed his cheek. Thank you for tonight, she said. Thank you for taking a chance on me. Don't waste it. Never again. She went inside, and Min Jae stood there for 10 minutes, touching his lips where hers had been, feeling like a man who'd been dead and was slowly, painfully learning to live again. Entry 819 that night read, Asterisk we kissed, and it felt like coming home after years in exile. Like forgiveness that hasn't quite arrived but might be on its way. Like love that was buried but not dead, just waiting for someone brave enough to excavate it. She's braver than me, stronger, better, and somehow, miraculously, she's given me another chance. I won't waste it. I can't. She's everything. 6 months later, Min Jae woke up to sunlight streaming through windows that finally felt like home. Aaliyah was beside him, not in the East Wing, not separated by 2,000 square feet of careful distance, but right there, her braids spread across the pillow, face peaceful in sleep. He'd been watching her sleep for 20 minutes now, terrified to blink in case this was a dream his desperate mind had constructed. But it wasn't a dream. She was real. She was here. She'd come back. Not easily. God, nothing about their reconciliation had been easy. 4 months of supervised couples therapy with Dr. Yoon, who'd made them excavate every wound, every moment of cruelty, every instance where love had died and needed resurrection. 2 months of dating like strangers learning each other, dinners, galleries, long walks where they'd rebuilt trust one conversation at a time. And finally, 3 weeks ago, she'd shown up at the penthouse with a suitcase and said, I'm not moving into the East Wing. If I'm coming back, we share a bedroom. We share a life. No more walls. Min Jae had cried, actually wept like a child, while Jin Sung pretended not to notice from the hallway. Now, watching her sleep, he couldn't stop touching her, gentle fingers tracing her shoulder, her arm, needing constant confirmation that she was solid and real and his again. You're staring, Aaliyah murmured without opening her eyes. It's creepy. I'm memorizing. There's a difference. He leaned down, kissed her forehead. Good morning, beautiful. Good morning, stalker. She opened her eyes, smiled that smile that still made his chest hurt with gratitude. What time is it? 7. We have 2 hours before your mother arrives to apologize. I know. Aaliyah sat up, sheets pooling around her waist. Are you sure she's actually going to do this? Mrs. Park doesn't strike me as the apologizing type. Jin Sung threatened to leak her plastic surgery records to the press if she didn't make things right with you. It was surprisingly effective. Min Jae pulled her closer, breathed in her jasmine scent like it was oxygen. But I don't care about my mother. I care about you. Are you okay with this? We can cancel if I'm okay. I need this, actually, closure. She kissed him softly. But first coffee, and possibly toast that isn't burned. I've been practicing. Only 2 fire alarms this week. My hero. They made breakfast together, actual breakfast, in their actual kitchen, like actual couples who hadn't spent 3 years destroying each other. Min Jae burned the toast anyway. Aaliyah laughed and made more. And Min Jae stood there, spatula in hand, thinking this simple, domestic, beautiful moment. This was everything he'd almost lost forever. Stop staring at me like I'm going to disappear, Aaliyah said, catching his gaze. Can't help it. You're the most beautiful thing I've ever seen, and I spent 3 years not looking. I'm compensating. He set down the spatula, pulled her close. I love you. Have I mentioned that today? Twice already, but I'll never get tired of hearing it. She wrapped her arms around his neck. I love you too, even though you're terrible at toast and stare too much and cry during romantic movies. That was one time. And Casablanca is objectively sad. You cried during a diaper commercial last week. It was about fathers and daughters. Very moving. He kissed her nose. Don't mock my emotional growth. Dr. Yoon says crying is healthy. Dr. Yoon also says you have abandonment issues and control problems. She's very thorough and slightly mean. You like her. I do like her. I see her separately every Thursday, remember? Aaliyah smiled. She thinks you're doing well, by the way. Remarkable progress for someone who started as emotionally stunted as a brick wall. Her words. She has a gift for compliments. At 9 a.m. sharp, the doorbell rang with the ominous finality of a death knell. Mrs. Park stood in the doorway wearing Chanel and regret in equal measure. Jean Sung stood behind her like a bodyguard, ensuring completion of mission. Aaliyah, Mrs. Park said stiffly. Thank you for seeing me. Mrs. Park. Aaliyah's voice was polite, professional. The voice she used with people who hadn't earned warmth yet. Please come in. They sat in the living room, the same room where Aaliyah had asked for a divorce and Min Jae had laughed. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. Mrs. Park looked uncomfortable, which was a first. I've been informed that I owe you an apology. You've been informed correctly, Min Jae said coldly. His mother shot him a look, then turned back to Aaliyah. At the gala last year, I made comments about your appearance and your background that were inappropriate and racist. I judge you based on prejudices I was raised with, and I failed to see the woman my son had married, a woman who, as I've recently learned, saved this family's empire multiple times while I was too blind to notice. Go on, Aaliyah said calmly. You are brilliant, gracious, and stronger than most people I've known in 73 years. You deserve better than how my son treated you, and you certainly deserve better than my cruelty. Mrs. Park's voice cracked slightly. I'm sorry, truly, and I hope you can forgive an old woman's ignorance. Silence stretched. Min Jae held his breath. Thank you for apologizing, Aaliyah said finally. It doesn't erase the hurt, but it's a start. And Mrs. Park, your son is nothing like the man who hurt me anymore. He's become someone who deserves respect. You should try seeing that instead of the disappointment you've always treated him as. Mrs. Park blinked, clearly not expecting the defense. He told you about that. He told me everything. That's what people do when they love each other. They're honest, even when it hurts. Aaliyah took Min Jae's hand. We're getting married again. A real wedding this time, not a business transaction. And you're invited, but only if you can treat me with the respect I've earned. Yes, of course. Mrs. Park stood, looking genuinely humbled for perhaps the first time in her life. Congratulations, both of you. When she left, Aaliyah exhaled slowly. You okay? Min Jae asked. Better than okay. I just made your terrifying mother apologize and look uncomfortable. I feel powerful. She grinned. Also, surprise, we're getting married again. We are. Because I want to marry the man you've become, not the man you were. I want a wedding where we both say I do and mean it. Where you look at me like I matter instead of like I'm a prison sentence. She cupped his face. I want to choose you, Min Jae Park. Every single day. For the rest of our lives. Min Jae's eyes filled with tears. Yes. God, yes. Anything you want. Everything you want. I want small. Intimate. Just people who actually care about us. Done. I want to write our own vows. Done. And I want you to promise, really promise, that you'll never stop trying. Never stop growing. Never become the man who hurt me. I promise. On everything I have, everything I am, I will spend my life being worthy of you. He kissed her, deep and desperate and grateful. You saved me, Aaliyah. From myself. From the emptiness I called strength. You saved me. No, she said softly. You saved yourself. I just gave you a reason to try. 3 months later, the second wedding was everything the first wasn't. Small, just 50 people who mattered. Beautiful. White orchids and jazz music and sunset overlooking Seoul. Real,